I want to grab Parker and let him in so he's not standing out there locked behind the door the entire time.
You're going to let him out of the closet? Is that?
Man, that sounds awkward.
Under the stairs, it's Halloween.
He's set up on a rifle rack, and he's got to undo him. Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, I keep Parker in a gimp suit in my closet whenever I need him.
So it just gave me a notification that I think Felix tried to join again while he was still in the room. Maybe he was trying to log in from a different device. So I actually kicked him out. So see if he can come back in. So if you guys are just joining us, appreciate you logging on. We're giving it a minute or so to let some people flow in. But this video will be a after action over the 40th anniversary One Shepherd training semester that just took place for the final field training exercise that's held at the end of every One Shepherd semester, and that's the final culminating event. But this year was very special. We had organizations all over the place and a whole bunch of bodies in this fight. And we thought it'd be a good idea to bring everybody together and do a better AAR because the one we had at the end of our semester was kind of condensed because we had so many people involved and there was a lot of stuff that needed to get done. So with that said, I appreciate you guys joining in here. We got one more member that we're trying to get on here before we get this kicked on. So we're going to give him a minute or so, not only to let people flow in, but also get this guy up and running. And that is Felix. He's the captain with the Missouri Militia who was on the Blue 4 side for the FTX. So let's try to get him in. For my guest here in this panel, if you guys I know you're for the most part new to this service, but on the right-hand side, you should see a little chat. And that's just viewers that are watching. They can chat and put comments there. So you guys can keep an eye on that for questions that might be specifically targeted to you or about, your particular side or organization. You guys see that? Nicole and okay, perfect.
All right. Looks like all the off force checking in.
Yeah, I know, right? Let's see. Chris, anything from Felix about coming back in?
Nothing so far. You know what? But why don't we do the introductions and hold his to last? And what I'll do is I will fudge it the best I can. You guys can fill in the gaps there because we've worked with them for years. We can talk about their institution and who their PL and APL were and their force structure, at least that. And then if he makes it in, he doesn't have to backfill all that. Plus, we can fill in for the rest of what was going on within the AAR, okay?
Okay, sounds good. So we got about 40 viewers in here right now, so I'll go ahead and begin this introduction. So essentially, fellas, what this live stream is about is going to be a after-action report review about the 40th anniversary One Shepherd training semester that just completed. For the final culminating event at every One Shepherd semester, there's always an FTX field training exercise, and this was no different, but this one was very vast. We had multiple warriors. Chris, how many total participants were there off the top of your head?
97 warriors in the FTX, supported by 19 staff.
19 staff. Oh, man. So 97 warriors, and then there was at least 4 major organizations that were taking place in this FTX. And at the very end of this FTX, after we called index and went back to the rear with all those bodies, all those people, all these moving parts, the AAR that we had, we did have an AAR, but it was very small and condensed compared to a normal One Shepherd semester. So Les shot across my bow. He thought it was a good idea. We bring everybody in and we try to have that better AAR that we normally have at the end of every One Shepherd FTX right here on a live stream. So not only the viewing audience on my YouTube channel can see it, but also all the warriors that took part in the FTX themselves. So with that being said, guys, we're going to go around the horn and everybody's going to introduce themselves. And I'm going to ask that some of the newcomers on here, they have their own respective organizations and who they're representing. Please take this time, talk about your respective organization. What you guys do, what you guys are about, and most of all, how can people partake in your training and how can they get involved in your organization? So, kicking it over to Les. Introduction, bud.
All right. Well, I'm Les from Pegasus Test. I was APL for the OP4 on this evolution, which was an awesome position to have. In addition to that, I was also the S4 out at this One Shepherd semester. So it was a great experience. It was awesome having 2 platoons reinforced by reconnaissance elements in the field. We had a great time. And, if you haven't done this before, people, you really want to be a part of this. Check out what we got to say. This was probably the toughest FTX we've done out of all the ones I've participated in. And Chris said it best when it was over. It's going to be hard to top this one. Tyler?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Tyler. I am with Light Fighter Studies Group. We are what I would consider an informal warrior community of practice that's dedicated to expanding the knowledge, skills, and abilities of dismounted light infantry patrolling. Basically, what we do is we participate in events like this, turn around, distill some of those lessons learned, and then produce learning products that enable other warriors, whether it's U.S. military, a foreign military, and or prepared American citizens, to better prepare themselves for dismounted light infantry fight. Right now we have a pretty closed group of membership. It's invite only, so we're not a training school like most of the other organizations that we're participating. But we are open for membership if you inquire about it, and then we can talk you through that process. Most of our folks are prior service, either U.S. military or law enforcement, and you can find us on Facebook by going to Light Fighter Studies Group and just generally searching that. So.
Hey guys, SNS Training Solutions here, Cole, Parker. We got our start in 2013. We've got our roots in One Shepherd, instructing with One Shepherd, and participated in several semesters from there. We tried to focus on a lot of live fire skills, carbine, pistol, and individual and small unit tactics at the fire team and squad level. And we do that through the Miles Force on Force platform. We also support other organizations like One Shepherd with Miles rentals or private events for private groups. Parker, you got anything you want to say?
We also do live fire training, if that was not mentioned. So snstrainingsolutions.com would be our website. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. So that's how you can find us.
You're up, Doc.
Oh, yeah. Okay. First, let me introduce, he'll be a little delayed, but Captain Felix, Philip Felix, is going to join us this evening. And if he can gather him, Lieutenant Matt Bolam. They were the other invites for our, for our 40th anniversary and our joint FTX. They represent the Missouri Militia. Missouri Militia is a chartered through the state state government. And it has been around since, gosh, I want to say the early 1990s. So anyway, very much a responsible militia, very much accountable to their communities, but also, again, working with everything from law enforcement to all the way up to the lieutenant governor himself. So so they have a wonderful tradition. And for, gosh, I want to say for the last 8 or 9 or 10 years, we've done periodically, we do joint operations with them, specifically joint FTXs. So this isn't their first time to the rodeo, but it was their first time producing an entire platoon. And then I should also say that while that platoon was it was a composite platoon of several different battalions, so they all sent basically a squad. They actually had 4 squads, and this was a little odd because the facility that we train at there in Central Missouri is called the Combat Maneuver Training Center, the CMTC, and the CMTC also joined the Missouri Militia, I mean, momentarily, to produce a squad itself. So, so you wound up with the Missouri Militia entire platoon, 4 squads, was 35 warriors. And SNS was their SNS Training Solutions, functioned as their battalion level asset of reconnaissance, a reconnaissance section, varying at different times, but when they entered 10-man recon. On the flip side, as you've already heard, we'll let other people talk about it, we had the one Shepherd platoon, 41 warriors in that platoon, three full squads and 41 warriors. And then it was backed by Light Fighter Studies Group as, again, the battalion level reconnaissance asset with an 11-man recon team. So that's the organizations as they fit. Again, you had one Shepherd, Missouri Militia, Light Fighter Studies Group, SNS, CMTC was in there, but we also need to definitely mention the Army Aviation Heritage Foundation, who flew the birds and did our air assault insertion. So 5 wonderful organizations all assembled there at the Combat Maneuver Training Center. All right.
All right. So I'm not sure if everybody, I know Les mentioned it, but I'm not sure if everybody else kind of told what they actually did during the FTX and what their roles were. But me, Brent, you guys should know who I am. But I was the patrol leader of the OPFOR platoon. And yes, platoon. I had 40-something guys in my platoon. So I had literally a TO rifle platoon. It was unbelievably awesome. Les was my APL. Tyler in charge of the Light Fighter Studies Group. They were our reconnaissance element. And then on the other side, you had the Missouri Militia, Captain Felix, who's going to check on later. And then you had the SNS Cats and Dogs, who were their reconnaissance element, and essentially doing for them what Tyler's group was doing for me. So with that being said, that is our panel tonight, guys. And I'm going to kick it over to Chris so he can guide this AAR. So.
All right, thanks. Appreciate that. So let's talk about what an AAR is and what an AAR isn't. There are lots of different types of reviews of a mission. Okay, guys? And the one that gets thrown around all the time is after action review or after action report. Either way, it's an AAR. And unfortunately, we've all gotten used to calling things AARs that aren't AARs. What we had at the end, because we had 5 martial organizations, martial communities involved in this, and we only had an hour to do it, we did a hot wash. A hot wash is when an external unit tells you what they think, right? So it can be a command team, either your command team or somebody who wasn't involved in the exercise. And typically it's observer controllers. I was heading up the observer controller team of 10 OCs plus other staff with the white cell. It was, like I said, pretty damn impressive. But we gave a hot wash, and that is that I say, well, this is what we saw go right. This is what we saw go wrong. Here's how we thought the missions were or were not accomplished. And it's our opinion. In an AAR, take all that, throw it in the file 13. Doesn't matter, doesn't count. The AAR is a process. It's a 4-step process. We'll get into it right in a second. But most important is the gentlemen you see in this panel and the gentlemen who are joining us soon, they were the doers. They were the warrior leaders. They had boots on the ground. So my opinion as the OC means nothing. What really counts is their assessment. And that's what we're going to get into. So we do that by saying, first we'll go around the robin and everybody will say from onset, from right prior to start X of the FTX on Thursday morning, what was your situational awareness? Let's do like a 2-minute drill, right? We'll do a 2-minute drill. What was your situational awareness and what was your plan? In the what was your plan, remember, this is the what you wanted to happen. There's always 2 missions, the one you wanted to happen and the one that really happened. And you don't want to confuse those 2 in the AAR. You want to start with what you dreamed would happen. Because later, after that, we're going to come back and talk about now what really happened. And you'll notice there's always a gap. There's a gap between what we dreamed would happen and reality. And what's important about that gap is what we study. We literally reflect on that to come up with what were the problems and sustains, problems we want to fix, sustains we want to continue, and then how do we fix those problems? So there you go. What I wanted to happen, what really happened, what were the problems and sustains, and how do we fix it? It's your 4, okay? That's your German 4 there. It's 4. And those are the steps. So that said, I need to shut up and Captain Felix isn't here, so you know what, Brent and Les, I'm going to kick it over to you guys right away. What did you want to happen?
Where are we picking up? We picking up after the road to war, or once we knew what our actual mission was supposed to be, or what?
Road to war up to your actual mission brief. That point, right in there. Just go ahead and give me a 2-minute drill, or you can use 4 between the two of you. But give me a drill and let me know, okay, this is what we understood. This is what our mission was. This is what we wanted to happen.
Okay, so we got a brief on the road to war, and for layman's terms, we got a scenario that was kind of based off of the situation that's going on in the Ukraine, except the actors are changed and things are kind of switched around. But we were filling in essentially what would be the Russian separatists back, by the Russians. And like I said, the names are changed in the road to war, but just for simplicity's sake, let's go ahead and say what it is. But that's what we were. And we were essentially tasked with the mission of there's a minefield. Our side had laid minefields in this AO, and it was identified that there was this gap that we didn't know about. It was found by some farmers. It was about a 400-meter or so gap in our lines, and we had to our unit, our platoon of 40 guys, was tasked with being air assaulted from the rear. We were in the rear with the gear, with the strippers and the whores and the alcohol, on our downtime, and we were supposed to get on the birds and get flown in to plug that gap as soon as possible, because it's only a matter of time before the enemy figures out that there is a gap right there and they were going to exploit it. So I'll kick it over to Les so he can speak. Les, you're muted, bud.
That was pretty much our mission, to plug that gap. And so when we got on, we made preparations. We took all kinds of fortification materials in there. We took lots of field phones, lots of radios. We pretty much intended to set up a defensive line that could repel any attacks and was there to stay for a while.
Yeah, if I could chime in on that. So all the personnel, or most of the personnel, were flown in by helo. And then there was a log train and convoy that was supposed to come up later with all the, the Pioneer gear, the fencing, and all the other stuff that we're going to use to, make more established defenses and set up this line of defense. But the initial goal was to get our bodies there in birds, light, man our positions, dig shell scrapes, skirmishers, until the rest of the gear could arrive to start, making more permanent structures.
All right, so let me ask you real quick. What were you told about the enemy situation? Les and Brent, what were you told about that?
Go ahead, Les.
We were told they were operating somewhere to our south in roughly a platoon-size formation, and that there would be probably probing of our lines, and that we were to get the lines set up as fast as we could.
Were you given any intel on the enemy's uniform or anything like that?
Yeah, we were advised they were wearing M81 Woodland with AR-15 type weapons, possible crew-served weapons as well, and that they were backed up by reconnaissance elements and logistics support.
That were wearing multicam. So
yeah, and multicam. So Woodland and multicam, yeah.
All right, let me stay with the Op4 side then and throw it over to Tyler real quick. Tyler, same sort of thing. From the road to war on to the mission brief, what was your understanding and what did you want to achieve?
So I would agree with Brent's assessment on what the situation was. We were tracking that. We were an 11-man reconnaissance section for battalion reconnaissance section, and so normally we would be supporting whatever the battalion main effort was. That just shifted to this reserve rifle platoon because of the current situation. And so the guys that we had available immediately go to conduct enabling operations for that main effort. And so our primary consideration for day one was to facilitate their infiltration into the AO and then immediately start conducting security operations so that they could establish their area defense.
All right, excellent. So that's the big picture plan, and it's more concrete. Well, we had this specific, objective, but in this case, it was a blocking position. And so, as they're describing, they're being thrust into an area that they don't know, they're not familiar with. The enemy is operating in, and they're tasked with, hey, set up a blocking area. And the reconnaissance was just trying, as Tyler said, enabling. The plan was they were going to go in and create the space for the for Brent's platoon to do that. All right. Having said that, I see we have Captain Felix. Captain Felix, we already told everybody you're Superman, and we introduced you, sang your praises. We danced around a fire and drank beer to you. Hey, brother. So go ahead and Captain Felix had the Blue 4 platoon, was the Missouri militia, and in this case, they were playing the role of the Ukrainians back, and they had they had a composite platoon, 35 in total, because they also had, again, we use different names, but they had an attached Polish squad to the platoon. So they actually wound up with 4 platoons. And then to his side there, you have, again, Cole Salmons and Parker Schreckenhaus. And Cole was the PL, Parker was his APL of the battalion level reconnaissance section. All right, so, sir, Captain Felix, what I got for you is, from the road to war, before you took off, before you went anywhere, so don't tell me about what happened, what was your big idea? What was your understanding, and what did you hope to achieve?
Yes, sir. So from the regimental mission that we received, we had reports of locals moving cattle through the area, which suggested a gap in a line from the current situation. So basically, in the scenario, our battalion was meant to patch together a platoon or a company to try to fill that gap and find out exactly what was going on in there.
Were you given a specific objective to hit, or just get in the gap?
So we were meant to patch everybody there, and then our initial mission was to conduct a movement to contact to try to establish some sort of understanding and gain awareness in that sector. And of course, we had the battalion recon team getting eyes on the objective as well.
Nice, thanks. Okay, so what people don't realize is that the Blue 4 reconnaissance element was that section was there 2 days, 48 hours before the Missouri militia picked up. So they're the ones who really, kind of fleshed out what the heck's going on here, and they're credited with finding the gap in the minefield. Cole, can you tell me from I'll give you this leeway. Do you want to talk from your onset 48 hours earlier, or shall we talk road to war just prior to getting on the birds and flying into the gap? Either one's up to you. Tell me what your understanding was and what you hope to achieve.
We'll talk about the onset just briefly because it touches on the situational training exercise where our FTX began 48 hours before that, but doesn't have a direct correspondence with the road to war and the events that transpired in the FTX, except for that gap that we were made aware of there. So other than our fluctuating from 7 to 9-man squad throughout the 5 days we were on the ground, we were able to kind of have some prior familiarity with the AO and establish a plan of long-range reconnaissance patrol. Once the 1st and 3rd hit the ground, we planned on us punching way deep behind enemy lines to try to gain better intelligence than we would just butting heads with the area defensive lines, and hopefully be able to cause maximum chaos and open up a gap from the rear once the time came for the deliberate attack.
All right, so that's something I didn't know. So that I did know that now we're starting to transition to what really happened. But before I go there, just for clarity, you weren't accidentally cut off. You got behind the enemy lines. That was your plan. Did I understand that correctly?
Correct. Yeah, we were to stay behind enemy lines and get as close as possible and report enemy positions with as fine details we could muster without exposing ourselves to enemy contact, and report that stuff back to Captain Felix regularly.
Okay, well, that's news to me. I thought you guys got cut off accidentally, unintentionally. I didn't realize that was the original plan. So that's kind of interesting. And it also, if I'm not mistaken, you're the first to make contact, the actual first to pull triggers on Thursday morning during or shortly after you were air assaulted into the AO. Is that correct?
I believe so. And I think Parker was on that 3-man reconnaissance team that made that first contact. Do you want to talk through that?
I actually do. If we're all good, hold on. Let me do a gut check here real quick with the rest of the panel, and that is to say, we've heard before we transition to what happened. We've heard what was supposed to happen. Is anybody surprised by that? No, it resonates well with, okay. And in that case, what I like to do with AARs, and if you guys want to go a different direction, there's no magic here. It's however we want to. But I like to go chronologically, pretty much looking at major events, which almost invariably happen to be when people are pulling triggers, because there's critical decision-making that happens there. So if it's okay, we'll kick it back to Parker and Cole and have them talk us through that first contact. It kind of surprised everybody, I think, as Op4 was still, flying into their LZ. There was contact, and so yeah, talk us through that, Parker.
Yeah, so it was myself, two other guys. So we moved out from our hide site, maybe 45 minutes out, kind of skirting a tree line. We were inside of that tree line, trying to see what we could encounter in there without getting into a big fight. My point man actually got fired at, so we briefly returned fire and then immediately broke contact out of there. He was only able to see one guy probably 40 meters into the woods, so that gave us a little bit of intelligence as to where their position was at, as far as to the east, because that was the direction that we came in from, was west to east. So that painted a little bit of a picture there. But again, with us only having three guys and really not trying to make contact, we boogied out of there and got that stuff back to the hide and then worked that up to Felix. So.
Yeah. So once they got in, they set in a couple of ambushes, maybe, anticipating them being pursued. Didn't follow through. We had a plan for them to meet at a certain point if they really got pursued, and we would follow up and link up with them there and fight it out. But they ended up just coming back to our hide. At that point, I ended up getting a little concerned that they were going to start sending out screening patrols out behind them to try to snuff us out. But what I suspected later, after we didn't see anything really come through, was maybe they thought that 3-man patrol kind of snuck in through their southern limit, and then just went back through that way. I'll be curious to see if that is the case. But then we radioed in that information to Felix to start developing the picture of the battlefield from there.
Yeah. It was actually an east to west movement. I got my directions flipped, so it was
right.
east to west.
Right. Tyler, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was your guys that got hit, right?
That's right, and this is the part that I was really looking forward to, is hoping to do a mind meld with Cole and Parker, because what had happened was we were facilitating the rifle platoon's infiltration off of the HLZ, and so my reconnaissance section was providing security not only locally for the disembarkment point, but also we were had set up a tactical assembly area. And so our idea was we needed to have some type of tactical control measure far enough away from the HLZ that we could facilitate the entire rifle platoon to come occupy without getting bunched up. And so my lead element, who was in the tactical assembly area, they were the guys that initially shot at reconnaissance section that was moving through there. And so, immediately, hey, we're shooting. We held what we had because we had to get that whole rifle platoon in that TAA. So we were not concerned with pursuit yet. We did suspect that maybe we caught your rear guard. We thought that you guys would be providing rear guard actions for your rifle platoon moving through. And so in the beginning, we were like, yeah, I think they've moved off. However, we quickly realized that the most dangerous course of action for you guys would be to do a stay behind. And so it wasn't too far afterwards that we did actually kick out security control. When the rifle platoon's coming off, they weren't all there yet. So we just kicked out a security patrol and we sneaked behind our rear area. Saw nothing. I'm assuming you guys moved at least a terrain feature away because we didn't decide to go into that open field and go into real deep Indian country. But we kept it close and then said, and I'm sure we'll get into it more, but we suspected you guys were back there, and it really bugged us the whole time because we kept wavering, like, you know, they're either all over there, and then we kept having this little thought in the back of our mind, like, no, they're doing a stay behind. I know it. So that was good for you guys for sure.
All right, so you know what? I know this was like that, you know, rock in your shoe you just can't ignore, right, Brent? And you and Les kept talking about, damn it, are they behind us? Damn it. I mean, like for a day and a half, I think God damn it, I think they're behind us.
Well, so it didn't help because every time me and Brent would do a sync, I would mention something, I think independently. And so I think we worked ourselves up and, oh yeah, they're definitely behind us, you know.
Which is demoralizing when you're building a defense oriented, you know, in their case, oriented south, and they're going, I think the bad guys are north of us.
Which that was like another goal of us was to, hey, we want to get some of their assets to focus on their rear to give the first and third the best chance possible when they do hit their front line.
Yeah. Did it work, Brent? Did it work?
So like Tyler already hit on, you know, when we were getting inserted, the bird had to go refuel. So we had a dwell time, and it came to a point where I was the first one on the ground with my RTO. I went in with the life fighters guys to get some SA on what was going on. And so I knew where to set my guys in as soon as they landed. But I only got about a platoon and a half, a squad and a half there on the ground before the bird left. And the decision was made, hey, we need to push to the objective so that we can start conducting leaders recon and stuff like that of the area. So when the rest of the platoon catches up, where Tyler's guys were going to guide them in, you know, they would be falling in place on the defense that we'd already laid out, you know, because I had all the squad leaders and stuff already there. But yeah, I specifically remember, you know, Tyler briefing me like, hey, we just had an encounter with some freaking multicam guys, and you know, we're not sure, they might be behind us. And plus, I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler, when our first elements were starting to land, we were kind of seeing some woodland guys like kind of walking around, and I think there was some word about they may have been lost, or their main body pushed out and left some guys behind on accident, and you know, so we kind of had that thought that there might be some stragglers, you know, walking around mindlessly in the woods because they were left by their respective units and stuff. So it was always in the back of our head.
Those rumors and J-Lo's dead.
So anyways, yeah. But we ended up getting down there doing a leaders recon. And before we had everybody, we heard that firefight take place, and we didn't know if it was a tail end of their main body or if it was an RBE that they had left back to fuck with us. But as time went on, you know, we weren't getting any contact to our rear. And although we were suspicious of it, I think we got a little bit more lax as time went on because there was no contact to our rear like there was in the early hours of the FTX.
Okay. Yeah. So the reason I like to bring that up, or wanted to bring that up, is several points. Perhaps most saliently, is that I just made a word. But most prominently is that there's a myth from watching Hollywood and reading books that our warriors and our warrior leaders go in and they know everything. I mean, they have a 99% understanding of the tactical situation. And I'm trying to belabor the point that was not the case here, that you're making imperfect decisions in an imperfect, austere environment, that you have to be very fluid. And that's one of those things we say, don't get too married to the plan. So I definitely want to belabor that. And then from an OC perspective, if I can interject that, and that is this, that so often we are doing squad on squad, you know, that's what, and I don't apologize for that. That's really where, you know, the leadership that we're trying to pull out. So you're seeing a squad on squad for an FTX. You're lucky if you see a squad on platoon. This is the first time, and we have had platoon on platoon, but this is only the fourth time in our 40-year history that we had platoon on platoon, but we've never had anything to this magnitude. I mean, we had 2 full platoons as well as 2 full reconnaissance sections. And so when you have, you know, 4 different elements moving in, it is not uncommon at all And in fact, I will say until the very last battle of this 3-day FTX, you're listening to battles that you're not part of necessarily. You're going, I don't know who's fighting over there. And so it adds more to that, what's often called, the a fog of war. Some people call it the friction of war. But it adds to that because you realize how imperfect your decisions are. So, again, to stay fluid. All right, if anything else to beat on that incident, or can we move forward?
Well, I think I have one more thing to add to this because I think it sets up, at least for us on the Op4 side, and I know the Blue 4 will get a chance to talk about their next piece, but there's a decision point that happened because, we had this plan to facilitate the rifle platoon's occupation of their battle positions. And then my reconnaissance section was going to go immediately transition to security patrolling. And because we had to stay to facilitate the rest of the remainder of the platoon coming off the HLZ, that changed the whole flow. And I think that's what's going to set up, at least for Blue 4's first deliberate attack. That's going to be one of the main reasons why we didn't have that forward security set up. So this had direct consequences or implications for the next phase of the operation right off the bat, that one engagement.
Yeah, that's a true point. I forgot about that.
All right. And then it is appropriate at this point to say, well, the next move was the first of the thirds. And so the Missouri Militia platoon, or I should say the Ukrainian platoon and the Ukrainian Pole platoon, you guys were, it took forever. I told you that they had the same sort of situation. They were a tactical reserve for the battalion. They were thrown in piecemeal. They were waiting for the rest of their unit to catch up, part of it by truck assault, part of it by air assault, in both cases, literally. So you finally get down there and you're assembled. And Captain Felix, what's your next move? Talk to us. What happens next?
Yes, sir. So essentially what came up is we experienced the same difficulties. We had lulls, but on the opposite end of the spectrum. So we had random sticks that got scattered on the HLZ, myself included, becoming a casualty almost immediately. But this is why we have a command team. So I was second bird in. I did see the beautiful peel that the first bird did heading north into the tree line. But as soon as I got off the bird and established security, I got flatlined. So essentially what happens is Blue 4 has 3 separate groups that are rattling to the coordinates that were given during the warning order that was distributed. Those 3 groups later become 2, and the 2 converge on the coordinate, and we gain an awareness to that we're the first ones on the ground. The guys that were meant to truck assault in haven't even left the fob yet. So we're looking around, kind of trying to decide, where are these guys at? Do we need to pull them in too? And they're like, we haven't even left yet. So that sets up a really interesting hurry up and wait situation for Blue 4 once we get all our sticks that were scattered.
Right. And that's the plan was that the truck assault, that the poles would bring in, the logistics and the rest of your platoon. And that just didn't happen for a series of reasons. But I mean, then you flex. So you get there and what do you do? I mean, do you step off right away? How long did your planning? How did you get your guys ready for that movement contact? And talk me through some of your decision-making and some of your challenges there.
Sure. So we already had our tentacle pan with the recon team. We knew that they were doing their job. And essentially what we were doing was giving them the longest window of opportunity to give us the best intel. So essentially we had made a prior agreement that if they hadn't produced intel or if we hadn't made contact, that we were going to step off and hit the line at some point. However, because of the lag and the lack of communication that we had, we did get the frago from higher once we got everybody together. Work detail came out immediately for priority as soon as the trucks came in to start establishing the reserve as a rest area for the recon team for when they did get in, so they could immediately start rotating out along with latrine and some other things. But essentially what happens is we decide to go ahead and step off on a movement to contact. However, we were not able to coordinate with the recon team to let them know that we had left. And I don't know how far are we in performance section here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Talk us through.
Okay, so that ends up being a mistake because we end up conducting a good force march movement to contact, and we smack into the line and jump into the grinder as well as expected. But because the recon team didn't know that we had left yet, they were kind of isolated from us, and we managed to have somebody left to gather the intel from it. But it was essentially a platoon wipe once we smacked against that line.
That's an excellent point. Since they're sitting right next to you, Cole, talk us through that. I mean, you hear, it's one of it was a big ass fight. I mean, we had 50, 60 warriors just slaughtering each other for a good 20 plus minutes. Where were you? What was going on? Were you in contact by radio? Talk us through that.
So we'd had comms earlier with first and third. And was there ever a message sent out to us or attempt to contact us before you guys moved out?
I think my RTO did try to raise you, but between the three comms, I don't think he was able to get to it.
Yeah.
I think it was Fieldcraft on our side.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Yes, we had a J-pole up, and we had made contact and sent out that info from that first contact shortly after that engagement. Sent him a good spot report. So at that point, we had, I think, 9 men on the ground at that point. So we were in our hide, established, working on rest cycles and kicking out 2 and 3 man recon patrols up to their lines. At that time, I had myself and another rifleman, Chris, on just a 2-man recon patrol, working up their lines, trying to come in more from the north and west, because we'd already established that they had at least one position in the area of the northeast limit there, where that minefield is. So we decided to come in more centrally where we thought their line would be. And we were about 75 meters out north of that line when we start hearing the contact. We anticipated that was some kind of probing recon patrol from the first and third that they had sent out on their own. So I didn't call the rest of our patrol online because we didn't want to spoil that we were indeed to their rear and gaining intelligence. So myself and my rifleman Chris, we moved up within probably 30 meters of their line. Identified what looked like a CP command post, and we just kind of observed and watched their lines and their security posture. Noticed that it was all south facing where the attack was coming from, which gave us pretty good indication that they kind of forgot that maybe we were back there, and made us feel a little bit more safe and able to scoot out of there quickly once the fight was kind of over, and gave us kind of a better northern line to give the first and third where we thought their positions were once we got in later that night.
Okay, so that totally caught you by surprise, the intensity and size of that fight.
Correct. Yeah. We thought it was going to be just a probe, and then over time it was like, maybe that was a big push, but by the time we realized it was a big push, it was too late to bring our guys up, which was at least 250, 300 meters away. Like Jackson said, beyond that major terrain feature. So we noted the information we had and intended to get that to Felix once we made contact with him that night.
Right.
Yeah, so that was the decision point, was do we hold the recon team and let them do their job even though we're smacking into this thing, or do we go ahead and commit them to maybe risk taking the line? And I didn't want to risk them. I wanted them to get as much information for a more coordinated, deliberate attack.
Sure. And so what hit was, essentially a full platoon. It was 3 squads. They left 1 squad back because they had all those logistics. They had vehicles and all that other stuff. So the Polish squad stayed back, and then they hit with everything they had, and they hit the enemy's far west of the line. So it was from you, it was a good, Cole, it was a good 700 meters. There's a half mile from where you were, that fight that took place. And I see Christopher Cooperthwaite said something like, yeah, it was 1,000 rounds in like 20 minutes. No, there was well more than 20,000 rounds issued here. In those 20 minutes, they went through about 3,000. It was just a bloodbath. And so, okay, so that's, but he commits to it. The point is that they go up, they see it, they execute what I would say is a textbook classic approach march movement to contact. He gets in the fight. He doesn't quite know. I think that's one thing I would say, Captain Felix, is that you committed before you really knew what it seemed to me. You committed before you knew what you had in front of you. But I will say this: you committed decisively. And so let's hear that from Brent and Les' side of the story, because they were on the receiving end of those 3,000 rounds, right?
Yeah. So if I could just back up a little bit, just kind of set the table here. So, when I hit the deck and I had about a squad and a half of my platoon on the ground, we pushed out, we did our leader recon, and we had pre-established, I had all the squad leaders. We had pre-established where our defensive line was going to be. And if you guys can see this, hold on.
Yeah, sure. The big.
There we go. Does that make sense? All right. So I'm kind of acting reverse here, but first squad over here, second squad over here, and a third squad was going to be in reverse, in the reserve. We had just set everybody in place. I mean, literally just set all of them in their positions. They hadn't even had time to really dig skirmishers yet. And Les, was kind of as the APL, he's kind of acting as the platoon sergeant. He's getting all the logs and, the packs, and the convoy is catching up with all the Pioneer gear. He's kind of coordinating all that. And that attack hit right when I had just pulled up my reserve squad to what was going to be our CP at the time. And these guys hit us right through here and hit our far western flank. And like the doc said, I mean, it was just unbelievable. I remember sitting there with my reserve squad at the CP saying, hold, this is probably just a probing attack. And it was just pop, 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 pop. And I said, go! And then that reserve squad rushed to plug that bleeding hole, because they were coming in force. And we saw Woodland, and we also saw multicam. So that was also something that kind of took our mind. At least we thought we saw multicam. That was something that took our mind off of the enemy might not be in our rear anymore.
You really got there. Multicam were the ghosts.
Yeah, I guess. But I swear we saw both. But it became very apparent that the enemy was making a big push early on, and we hadn't even had our positions set up yet. So I want to kick it over to Les so he can contribute to this.
Yeah, that was an interesting fight because, as Brent said, we were just set up. I had just got all the fortification gear consolidated at our what was going to be our CP, and I was getting ready to organize the working parties to go lay in the wire, get the comm wire set up, and get the overhead cover built. And just then, the pop, like Brent said, we think this is a probing attack. And then pretty quickly after that, it's like, no, it's a major decisive battle. Brent goes forward, and then get word shortly after that he's down. So I go forward to get assessment of the situation. And just when I thought we were starting to push it back off to the right, I see a head poke up. I'm like, oh, there's my guys. And then boop, I get popped. So really it speaks well to the small unit leaders, because they're the ones who held the line. As Brent and I fell back to the casualty collection point and people were coming in, we noticed it was the unit leaders that drifted in next. And then it was down to the individual Jundies that held the line.
Yeah. And then as Les and I are sitting in the dead zone, and those guys are taking over because we could hear it on the radios. I'll let Tyler speak to it. We started seeing his guys coming in from the rear, moving in to reinforce that western side of our flank.
Yeah. And obviously we knew that was a decisive attack just because of the volume of fire. We were actually in a security posture probably about, I'd say, 20, 30 meter. Well, no, excuse me, about 75 meters away from the rifle CP, rifle platoon's command post. We, at that point, were getting ready and we're doing our own troop learning procedures to start kicking out reconnaissance patrols, and then quickly realized that this was a major attack. By the time we got pushed up to reinforce the line, there wasn't a line left on that side, that battle position. We walked in and had found 1-2-man team left, machine gun team that was still holding strong. And, we coordinated with them. There was about 2 to 3 guys, Blue 4 guys left, disorganized. We mopped them up real quick, pushed down and reestablished a security position. By that time, the rifle squad leader that was surviving, he was in the other battle position. He had come over to coordinate. And so, we shored up the line and then held fast for a while. One of the, and later, I think this will get into the lessons learned down the road. But one of the things that, looking back that our reconnaissance section would have liked to and should have done prior would have been to conduct rehearsals with that rifle platoon for during an attack, what they wanted us to do and when they would commit us. Obviously, the rifle platoon had its own reserve, but we became a secondary reserve by default, right? And so anyway, that's a lesson learned for us that we wrote down and said, hey, if we're ever coordinating with another unit like this and we come behind the flot, we need to link up with that forward unit commander and figure out what the SOP is for what happens if we all get attacked here. What do you need us to do while we're doing our troop learning procedures? So that was kind of our perspective.
Right. And so, I got to be the OC on that phase of it, just happened to be behind Captain Felix. So, and I think light fighters committing to that, the reconnaissance, because at that point, Captain Felix platoon actually did have an undersized squad, but more than just a fire team. They had an undersized squad up on the objective. They had seized obviously not the entirety of the of that flank, but they had seized a sizable portion of it, and it was literally the light fighters coming and sweeping in and crashing against them that forced them to, they're hanging on by the fingernails, and they forced them to give way. And so the magnitude of that fight produced 25 casualties for the Blue 4 and 24 casualties for the Op 4. So this was a 20-minute bloodbath. It was incredibly violent and high rates of volumes of fire. And neither side was really, it wasn't yet a set defense. It was, hey, we're trying to set in our defense, which I think, honestly, in Captain Felix, I think that was the time to hit it. It was like your greatest opportunity. Hey, these guys don't have concertina wire up. They don't have pews up. They don't have, they hadn't even had, I don't even think you guys had interlocking sectors of fire established yet. So
that is the only thing we did have.
Well, if I could just chime in on that, just like what Les said, that is the only thing we did have. And this was the first semester where we taught the light support weapon. And I made it a point that our light support weapons, which for those that don't know, they're, our automatic rifles at One Shepherd, they have binary triggers. Those guys are issued more magazines than the standard riflemen. They have bipods. I put those in areas of key terrain oriented on likely avenues enemy approach. And like what Tyler said, one of those guys on the far right side, he was one of the very first guys that we made sure was set in. He accounted for like 6 enemy KIA allegedly or something like that.
Yeah, and he burned through 7 magazines too.
Yeah.
When they finally got him and stuff, he was probably instrumental in holding the line.
Yeah. So that was sorry.
Honestly, fire in that whole section of woods. When we came up, we immediately pushed over there, and he was dominating that whole terrain. And as a prior machine gunner, I went, oh yeah, there's a reason why this guy was here. And you could just tell that as those guys came right through towards your CP, he was just flanking fire the whole way.
I want to add a little insinuation to that. During the Styx lanes, SNS provided 2 area defenses with the combined force with the 1st and 3rd. And on the night Styx lanes, when we did the night area defense, that's something that we really honed in was the buddy team positions with the shell scrapes and the interlocking sectors of fire. And it was literally a night and day difference. We were able to hold that left side way better than that day iteration. And it just spoke volumes to, hey, just follow the SOP and do what you're supposed to be doing. And it does work. So, kudos on you guys for implementing that and making it happen during the FTX.
Yeah. Captain Felix, if you'd have been there 10 minutes early, you probably would have had a very different result, to be honest. That's how close it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what happens in One Shepherd is there is what's called your respawn rules. And these are at least when you are in a contiguous AO, and then this was certainly that. What that means is simply this: the blue 4 to the rear is blue 4. So they can be reinforced. The Op 4 can say the same. They're up north, and to their rear is Op 4. So in contiguous areas, that respawn rate allows that command team to come back and say, look, we just took 24 casualties. Send us up, another squad. Send us up another platoon. Reinforce us in whatever ways you can. And so we simulate that in the simulation. Or we represent that in the simulation through a respawn rate. So there was a 2-hour respawn, and it was for both. I'll go ahead and disclose in case you guys didn't figure it out. This is truly the first time in my memory in 40 years we've ever done this where the respawn rates were exactly the same. We've had them as close as 15 minutes apart. Typically, they're anywhere from 30 to 1 hour, 30 minutes to an hour apart. You guys had identical top of the hour, even number hour respawn rates. And so I don't know if you guys ever figured that out. And, it's okay if you didn't. What it does allow, though, I'll just let people know that, yes, you say, oh, well, they're game playing. They're going to do an attack right before that time, 15 minutes before their respawn. Yeah, as you would in your lines of communication, your lines of logistics, you're going to do that so that you have follow-on troops. And so that is very much represented in the simulation. I
will say that I remember some guys on our team saying, well, we're the even hours, so they must be the odd hours. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I'd be so sure about that because some of those things that happen, just didn't jive with that. So you can't always anticipate that they're going to be the polar opposite of what your respawn is going to be. So I'm glad that it was not that also.
Yeah, like I said, maybe we did it like once in the 1990s or 1980s. I don't remember. I mean, we've been around a long time, but seriously, I don't ever remember doing that. That kind of is like a general no, don't do that at the same time. So it seemed like the perfect time to do it. And anyway, so everybody had to fall back and really kind of lick their wounds because it was an intense fight. And then what happens? I think at that point, both Reconnaissance start to kick out, start to really become active. I know Tyler does. And Cole, if we can jump back to Cole, because I know he and Parker, you guys made some you were behind enemy lines, but you made a critical decision there. Talk us through that.
Right. So we had prepped to go out for about 12 hours. We heard the massive firefight that happened. I think we kind of gathered that it was a major push. So we gathered the intel that we had and sent it back to Felix via radio with RF-10. Said we had a suspected enemy CP at this grid, and we had previously set a time for I think 1915 for the deliberate attack. So we were expecting if we didn't make radio comms with first and third, that we were going to go ahead and push up at 1915 and start hitting them from the rear, anticipating a forward push from them south to north from first and third. Once we got that info to them, and we basically, we reused the SOI, all that stuff. We said, what are your orders? And we get return to patrol base. And we're like, it took us a second. We're like, okay, all right, something's changed, something's happened. So what we're going to do is it's close to dusk now. We're going to go up, recon a little bit more, see what we can find, and then try to punch through the enemy, the Op 4's lines, and get back to our own lines in the darkness. And I'm expecting massive casualties on the recon patrol. So do you remember what time we set out on that, Parker?
I don't know if I was there.
Yeah, that's right. You took off before that. So it had been between 20 and 2200. We start working up towards our lines, and we split into two different distinct groups on that: a 3-man patrol and I believe a 4-man patrol. And coming up towards the edge of the minefield on the eastern edge of their line, we moving closer, and then we see a lone cedar tree out in the open, and we notice that an IR light is flashing, kind of scanning or looking for something. So we decide to put it under fire and then move across the open field from the north to south to get back to our lines, which was about 225 meters that we broke contact across. I know we at least got one KIA on what turned out to be a machine gun nest covering that field. And we noted a couple other positions in the tree line to the north. But it gave us kind of great intelligence for the next morning when we decided to kick out a recon patrol on what we need to be looking at for the 1st and 3rd. But we get across the field, we link up with 1st and 3rd, probably about midnight, something like that. And we go right into a rest cycle for SNS at that point.
Roger that. No, I mean, I was really impressed with the, it's not often talked about in military circles in history about a proper E&E, an exfiltration, but I think you guys did an excellent exfil. And the terrain that they were going across, you guys know, right there beside the minefield was a wide open, low grass. I mean, just to get through that was a pain in the ass. So to do it as quickly as you did with, the minimal amount of casualties is actually rather impressive. And then move, like you said, you broke contact for a couple hundred meters, and then you had to move another 500 or 600 meters south of there just to do a link up, which we know clandestine link up in middle of the night when everybody's like a little jumpy. As a matter of fact, let's turn to the man next to you. When all that's going on, Captain Felix, what was you got a frago in there. What was your frago?
Yes, sir. We're basically told to hold the line. So we're setting up an area defense, but looking at the terrain and seeing how vast of an opening that we had to cover, instead of doing a really stretched stack defense, we decided to kind of do a stronghold defense on the military crest of a hill. And we did something a little unorthodox. We used what's called an anchor method versus the lazy W. So we basically held our area and left a little bit of a gap between us and the Polish. And so our screening patrols would just beat boots between the gap. And that way everybody knew that anything forward of our lines was probably not our guys, except for the recon team that was coming in, which they radioed in, and we knew when they were coming in. But of course, by the time we got the frago, it's about 45 minutes till civil twilight. So getting in positions and getting positions designated and built up was a challenge because most of my guys, some of them it's their first time doing patrolling stuff at night. So essentially what happens is I have to get after them for noise and light litter discipline, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But we do get in some fighting positions. We got maybe some tanglefoot forward, and then we plan to establish a minefield and barrier fences in the morning.
Right. Okay. So a strong point defense. I saw, the Polish squad did that down in the low ground to your, basically to your right. But low ground to your right. You had the high ground. The AAO there we often refer to as shoebox, and there's two hilltops there called the twin nipples or the nipples. And you wound up taking the easternmost nipple, doing a U-shaped 180 strong point on it. You had, like I said, you had the on the low ground to the east of you. You had the supporting unit there. Cole, where was SNS? Did you just fall into their reserve, or did you establish your own strong point?
I'll share screen if I can. Let's see if I can do it. Entire screen window. Let's do a window. There we go. Perfect. Then I'll be able to see and talk at the same time. So can you guys see that?
Yeah, zoom in, zoom way in. A little more. There you go.
All right. So that area you're talking about is right in here, the twin boobies and the cleavage, we'll call it. Their defensive line was worked in right here. The previous night before, SNS had moved into the AO and set up a small hide here. Once we got in that night, we realized that they only had enough assets to cover to about here on their western limit. So we posted a watch for our sector that night. And then first thing that morning was we started tying in our defenses by laying a minefield down to the road, back around to cover our position, because we assumed that we would continue screening and be forward of our position, so we wouldn't have an ability to watch their left flank there, their western flank, and then started advising on tying in the concertina wire emplacements from the lessons that we learned in the sticks lanes the previous couple days while we were out on the FTX.
All right, that's cool. All right, so that's at any time, let's go back to the other reconnaissance. Tyler, talk us through what are you doing at this time?
So at that point, after consolidating, after that big firefight, we waited for the rifle platoon to reinforce those positions, and then we did a battle handover with them. At that point, we realized that we needed to be really aggressive on our reconnaissance. I kicked out a small reconnaissance patrol that was no more than 300 meters away from the rifle platoon's battle position immediately after the firefight. And one of the things that they came back with was they had seen the pig trails through the grass that the Blue 4 had used to infiltrate in. And so gathering that information and coming back, I worked up a plan with Brent to kick out my elements of my reconnaissance section to go start doing some deep recon in their AO, the enemy's AO. And that's what we did. We organized a patrol and we kicked them out. So.
All right. So at this time, Brent and Les, you also receive sometime that night Frago. You got your whole team, and you get a Frago to conduct a deliberate attack, or anyway, an offensive action against enemy suspected in shoebox. But we didn't have much to tell you. So talk to me through your decision making and your coordination for that effort.
Yeah, so immediately following the main battle earlier in the day, we kicked our guys immediately to priorities of work. Our biggest priority was establishing that defensive line. I mean, and like we had already said, we had taken 20-something casualties, so we saw some very, very big critical vulnerabilities that we had to address, and we thought we could address that by getting that wire up, getting those positions built up, and everything else. And then there was that incident where the SNS guys had pushed through, which we were given that intelligence from that fighting position. They said, "Hey, these guys came from behind us." So, we were told so at that point we were very cognizant of the fact there was an element from behind us at some point, and they just pushed through. And then we were dropped with that Frago. And I think it was you, Chris, that gave me that Frago. Was it not? Or was it somebody else?
I don't remember if it was me or not. One of the OCs gave you a Frago. Yeah.
But I remember getting this Frago, and it said no later than 05, you will conduct an attack. My first question was, well, do we have any intel on where the enemy is? And they're like, nope. If you don't have any, just do a movement of contact till you find it. So at that point, I immediately turned to Tyler and I said, "Hey, man, I need you to find them. Give me something. Give me an area of operation. Figure out where the hell they're at." And that's they punched their guys out, and to their credit, they located at least the general area on where the enemy was. And if you guys don't know, like Missouri Woods, man, there is hardly any illume. I mean, if you got PVS 14s, you can see just enough to get through, to get by. I mean, it's dark, so it's hard to.
And that was honestly, that was almost a new moon. You had something like 9% illumination.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. And then you're in that heavy canopy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I at that point, after Tyler had briefed me, he came back, and I've actually luckily I got this all on video of him giving a brief on me on to where exactly their enemy forces are conjugated at. So with that very minimal intel, I called in all my squad leaders. By this time we had built up this big elaborate CP with overhead tarps, and we got a hanging map on the wall, a big size one. And I went to all my squad leaders and I said, look, I'm going to pull a Leonidas and it's 300 here. I was tasked with conducting an attack no later than 05. They didn't tell me what kind of attack. They just said, you conduct an attack at 05. I said, we're going to conduct a raid. I was like, we're going to conduct a raid, and the mission of this raid is going to be to gather intelligence. So I said to all the squadrons, I said, go back to your squads. I want anyone that's got night fighting capabilities. And what that was they got night vision, and they got some way to engage enemy at night, i.e. IR lasers or some sort of optic that works in conjunction with their MVGs. But I was like, I want night fighters only, because I didn't want anybody without nods going through these woods, pitch black, and they're going to give our position away. And it's, quadrupled the difficulty in conducting this raid. So that's what they did. They came, squad leaders went back to positions. They talked to their guys. They came back, and my end total was 13 warriors. So I had essentially a Marine rifle squad to conduct this attack with. But I want to kick it back over to Tyler to kind of talk about the intel that he had at the time on what he knew about the enemy location and positions.
Yeah, so this was still daytime when I kicked my first reconnaissance element out, and this is before we had the Frago. And so we're still operating on no change of mission. We're still conducting an area defense. The rifle platoon is still conducting area defense. So I kicked a one 4-man fire team out. They were able to locate the enemy position because they were able to see just movement, general movement, guys digging in, stuff like that. So they were confident that was where an enemy battle position was. When they came back about that time, my reconnaissance team came back. They gave me a back brief of their patrol, gave me what they had in their grids. To my guys' credit, they immediately logged those grids. They had their GPS systems, logged those grids, came back. We had grid coordinates for Brent. And right about that time, we got a Frago back with the rifle platoon saying, hey, you guys are going to conduct a deliberate attack. And so, our planning cycle shifted multiple times concurrently. So, we were operating on one set of assumptions and guidance, and then all of a sudden it would just keep shifting. And so, as my guys start trickling back in, we were able to update the rifle platoon leader a little bit more. At that point, after doing the mind meld with Brent and giving him what we had, it was very obvious that we were going to have to do a nighttime infiltration into that AO and then facilitate that rifle squad's raid. And so I had kicked out my second fire team to go proof a lane, to bring them to an objective rally point. So they were on the move. At some point, and I was actually with that patrol, at some point, we started hitting our no later than time to be back to pick up the rifle platoon. And so before we left, me and Brent got on the same page and said, hey, that rifle squad's going to be ready to go at this time. Then we're going to facilitate them, because we just, from 05, which was our no later than hit time, to the time we got our Frago, there was not enough time to sit there and do a big rehearsal. And I mean, it was moving elements are going to have to piece this thing together. And so we proofed that lane. We came back. And was ready to pick up that rifle squad. Our plan was to leave my reconnaissance fire team up in the ORP to occupy it. We couldn't get any eyes on the objective, so we knew we were taking a risk by not leaving eyes on the objective the entire time. But we were at least confident that we could still conduct a raid. Given the night fighting capability of the rifle squad that Brent was bringing, and the fact that we did locate them, and that we were confident that we could move on the high ground that was saddled between those two hilltops. We were around there and there was so we were like, oh man, there's really no security over here. We can get pretty close and approach. So with that in mind, we came back to pick up the rifle squad, and then we led them back up to the ORP. I will say that there was a massive mistake that we made. My rifle fire team leader was very confident that he knew, or my reconnaissance fire team leader was very confident that he knew where he was going. And so when we proofed the lane, we actually were way off our mark originally and had to come way back. So, to the rifle platoon's credit, halfway through that infiltration they must have been cursing our name because we took them through all sorts of nasty shit. Afterwards, we were like, oh, no, we swear we know where we're going. And halfway through, my RTO was like, wait, do we know where we're going? And anyway, the method that we were using breadcrumb chem lights. They're like literally, inch and a half, maybe tops. And we used those all the way up to good effect. And I think some of the guys I'm seeing in the chat, they were saying, I had nods and it was, pitch black, dark. I couldn't see shit. Yeah. That's why we had marked our trails. So we used a variety of different techniques to get them in, but we were able to facilitate that whole rifle platoon getting up and on top of that terrain feature without getting caught. So, I'll, I guess, turn it over to you, Brent.
Yeah, so the plan was, like he said, the reconnaissance guys were going to take us to, if you guys can think back to the map, the far west nipple. So think the titties. We were on the left nipple of the titties on the far west side, and that was our ORP. So they got us to the ORP, and once we got down there, I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, Les, I remember them telling us that we originally thought it was 300 meters due east from the nipple, right in front of where the enemy position was. But once we got up there, they said it was closer to 500 meters. So that was one of the on-the-spot changes that we had to make on the fly. So from that nipple, we had we had our point man, and then right behind him was the compass man. Compass man set his dials, and we went. We started moving I said at 300 meters, we're going to do a 360 and see where we got. And then I remember hitting that 300 meters, and then I think we went another 100 or so. And then once we were there, we started heading due south, and I think it was no more than 100 meters. And next thing I know, my point man, who actually had a bridged MVGs. One side was not regular MVGs, and the other side was a thermal. And he says, "Hey, I was the third man in the line. We were moving in a Ranger file." He's like, "Dude, I got heads right in front of me in front of fighting positions." And what he said was, he's got 3 guys maneuvering to our right flank and 3 dudes in fighting positions. And it looks like they're all in stand 2, and these guys are moving to our right. And so at that point, I'm sitting there like, freeze, motherfuckers, because I still got guys behind me like adjusting their gear. You guys don't, it's hard to put in perspective how far these guys have already moved. They've moved over, maybe close to 2 clicks already. And they're tired. They're moving through the woods. They're breaking branches. And it's like, here we are right in front of the enemy positions. And the guys down the line, it's so dark, it's hard for them to see hand and arm signals too in the woods. And I'm just like
coughing and farting and
yeah,
shut up.
I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm 2-fisting it pretty much, man. Both sides, like trying to get dudes to shut up. And at this point, my lead guy, my point man, he's maneuvering around. And he's telling me the enemy's maneuvering around to us. And at that point, I was 100% convinced that they had heard us and they were about to flank us, and we were done for. We were just going to launch an attack from that point on. But we sat there for a couple minutes, and after a couple minutes, my point man whispers in my ear. He says, "I got 3 guys. They're circle jerking, and they're just gaggle fucking right now. They're just chit chatting." And at that point, I knew, holy fuck, we just snuck in on them. They have no idea we're here. It's showtime. And
so hold on. So let's ask Captain Felix, Parker, Cole, what do you got? Were you guys aware that it was there? Any report whatsoever that you were about to get hit by a sizable enemy force?
Sure. I think it's probably sometime after 02 at this point. So the guys have really worn down.
Yeah.
We had a 2-hour rest cycle for the guys to rotate, but because the guys weren't able to rotate through the sections, my orders were to just do 50% throughout the night, 2 hours in place. So we had guys on reserve on standby that were just resting, which was the Recon battalion. And then we had, I think our second and third squad were at the full strength. The first squad was really under strength. So the command team attached to it. We had no prior warning other than we're waking up to gunshots that morning.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I think it's like 04. Am I wrong, Brent? It was like 04 at that point?
I remember it being very close to our no later than time. I think we conducted that raid shortly before 05.
Yeah, it was about 4:45, 4:50, something like that.
Okay. So the enemy is, in this case, I mean, they're up. They've got good security. They've got good rotation. He's managing a defense. What little he could put in yet, they had plans to start doing that at daylight. But he's, all elements are up. I mean, he's got 3 elements there. He's got the reconnaissance. He's got his platoon, and then he's got down in it's actually northeast of him, but down in the low ground, he's got the Polish squad with all their vehicles and they had machine guns and everything else too. So he's got them set up, and again, you've got people up on guard and a reserve ready to roll. And then what happens?
Yeah, so the fighting broke out that night. I was personally in a CP position, slightly forward of the line, along with some false fighting positions, and it appeared that we were getting hit on the westerly limit, and you could tell it was the night squad that was rolling because they were moving very well throughout the area. Essentially, I think at the end, when it was all said and done, we only had about 30% left on the line, and it was our far east fighting positions that we had intentionally punched out a little bit further. So they were like 30 to 35 meters over terrain features and close to the road. So you probably just got on an azimuth and missed them. And since we didn't see you guys occupying, we were like, we just got knocked by a recon force on the line and almost lost it. So essentially that's where we're at. Real quick, I just want to let you guys know we're not ignoring you on the chat. I did see some good traffic out there. Somebody was asking and inquire. So just real quick, MissouriMilitia.com. You can negotiate the units for your local area.
Yeah, right. Thank you, and good catch. I've been trying to, see the comments there. Lots of good comments rolling. Okay, so you're caught unaware. They roll up. You said really like 70% of your platoon. I will say this, that the Polish squad was not hit till the very, very last hours of the FTX. So that they were so far away and so far down in a defilade that they weren't. However, Salmons, were you guys involved in that fight at all, or did that just happen beside you?
Yeah, so part of our rest cycle was we got our guys out of gear as soon as we could, and I told them as soon as they start their watch, as soon as you guys are done with your watch, you go back to sleep in your gear. That way, as the night progressed, we would have more guys in their fighting load ready to get into the fight. Because I suspected that we would probably get hit around stand 2, somewhere around then, before or after. So I wanted as many as our guys ready in reserve capacity as possible. So whatever time that was, I have no idea. I can't remember. We start hearing the firefight come in. We're like, all right, it's here. Here it comes. We're going to stay here until Felix calls us to hold this side of the line, because we still don't have that minefield or that concertina wire barrier out yet, because that didn't take place till the next morning, which would have been Friday morning, if I'm right. Is that right? That this was Thursday night into Friday morning, correct? So we're kind of standing fast, holding, making sure nothing comes up our side. And then as the battle progresses, we hear fighting, push in deeper in the line. And once we hear it to be about 40 meters past, I pick up the SNS Spartan Patrol, and we push forward and kind of assume the defensive line. which it sounds like the 13-man patrol had kind of been decimated down to, I don't know, half, whatever it was. We were able to push forward and hold the line from there.
All right. Right. So, okay. I thought you guys were involved in that. And yeah, people are who's the Polish squad? We called them the old guy squad. So just for clarity, yeah, the old guy squad, and aptly named, not only because yes, many of them are old guys, and I'm not, just for clarity. But also because they were like vehicle mounted. They were a motorized unit that acted far more like engineers than infantry, but nonetheless. Okay, so that's what's going on. Brent, you guys get up. You've executed. You're on execution. You and Les, talk us through what goes on there, because there were some lessons learned. I want to move there quickly. We're already an hour and a half into this, but there were some really cool lessons learned, not just about the execution on the objective, but also falling off of that with your reconnaissance support. And so, talk us through.
Yeah, so we initiate this raid, and how that unfolded is my point guy, he had an LSW, and I told him those 3 guys he saw, gaggle fucking, he needed to move into position and engage those 3, see if he could take all 3 of them out in one burst, and that would kick off our raid. So he did that. The rest of us began our raid, and it's important to note that we had the whole point of the raid was to gather intel. What I mean by that, at one Shepherd, if you're dead, and somebody comes up to you that's alive from the other side, and they say, do you have intel? You have to provide them any intel you have. And if that's, it could be a map or what we call an SOI. It's got, your call signs, radio freaks, and everything else. You can give that, you have to present that to the enemy, and the other side can take a picture of it. They can write it down, but they can't keep it. So that was the whole point of the raid. So what we established was we're going to take bunkers. And as we take bunkers, if there's a dead enemy in that bunker, we were going to yell out the brevity code, which was titties. So we kick off the raid, and as soon as I came out of the tree line, there was a manned bunker right next to me, and I killed that dude. So I'm yelling titties for like 5 minutes. I must have yelled titties like 30 times, and that was supposed to be, we had pre-designated sensitive site exploitation guys. There was like 3 or 4 of them, and they were the guys with cameras and everything. Those guys on call of titties were supposed to come, jump in those positions, and take pictures of intel. So that ended up happening, but it didn't happen until late in the raid. So we lost maybe half the raid force. So what ended up happening is essentially a fire team plus side of guys that were still alive. Were still out there on the objective, isolated on their own, and the rest of the main body that was KIA, and I think there was one alive that was actually following the KIA out. Were on their own, and we had to exfil. We had to get out of there because we were dead. We couldn't help them whatsoever. And those alive guys were still out there hooking and jabbing for some time. We get back to the ORP. Those that are dead, I asked Tyler, hey, can you leave an RBE behind to collect those, guys that are still alive out there to get them back to the camp. But I don't want to talk too long. I want to kick over to Les. I know he hasn't said anything in a while. And do you have anything you can throw in on this?
Well, I heard you screaming titties at the top of your lungs, and as one of the guys with the camera, I came right over, got killed as I was about to take the picture, mainly because I was laughing so hard that you screaming that at the top of your lungs.
It was right in my face, man.
Oh, I know. I was getting my camera out. Then one of Felix's guys came out and put a burst in my face. So, but I died laughing, and that counts for something. No, but it was interesting when we hit the line. I was tail end Charlie is where I should be as APL. So last guy to get on the objective, and coming up last of 13 guys until I got to Brent's bunker. Every bunker I went to help somebody with, they'd already overrun it. And I had gone to 3 positions. Then I heard Brent screaming and went over to him, and that position was secured. So, we had good violence of action from our point of view. Although with the amount of gunfire put up, there was definitely a resistance that we did encounter. Definitely didn't catch Felix's guys napping, that's for sure. Once we got most of the element gotten killed and we got some intel, we did pull off the objective, and the dead guys consolidated and were led back to our lines. And we did have an element still on the objective, just like Brent said, hooking and jabbing and causing problems and getting some more intel.
Okay, so we had a great question here. I'm sorry, I forget who asked it, but one of the One Shepherd guys, and they said something to the effect of, okay, but on the next time we should do an LOA and then on a raid, do an LOA, then fall back and pick up our intel. Was that not part of the plan, or no? I mean, again, was that part of it, or no, that wasn't part of it this time?
No, it was capture the information as quickly as possible. Our orders were to conduct an attack, and pretty much Brent decided, and I concurred with the decision that, okay, a raid is an attack. Go in, get some intel, and get the hell out as fast as we could, mainly because we only had 13 guys with night fighting capability.
Right. All right. Excellent. Now, you had 13 guys, but I want to get over to Tyler because he not only led you guys in, occupied the ORP, led you guys in, and provided left and right security. But I'll jump to the point. The point is that the dead guys who, take their hat off, they're like, okay, we're administratively need to be moved back. He apparently, I don't know by, hook or crook, one way or another, he allocated some people in the reconnaissance to get the dead guys back administratively. But the problem seemed to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the warriors left alive on the objective then fell off in good order, but did not go back to the ORP for some reason, and thereby kind of tried to bypass the reconnaissance that was supposed to lead them back to the flot. Tyler, talk us through what's going on there.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. The initial first wave of the rifle platoon that came off the objective, there was a mixed bag. I think some of the guys were still alive, some of them were dead, and so most of those guys were getting off. I had sent 2 guys back to lead them back to their lines. And this is a lesson learned, I think, from our perspective as reconnaissance section. One of the things we should have done, and everything was compressed for time. So we cut corners to make this thing happen, and we took massive risk to do it. And we knew that. We knew that doing this whole operation that night by meeting that time hack, we were going to cut massive corners. One of the things that we didn't do was a route briefing with Brent's guys, at least with his key leaders, to know where in, where out. We didn't do some type of significant event rehearsal about, okay, how are you going to flow off this objective? What's your withdrawal criteria? Where are we all going to come to? We made the assumption they were all going to come back to the RP. The first wave did kind of. They just the terrain funneled them instead of coming all the way back and staying on top of the high ground, the saddle. They just started going down the hill. So sent some guys out. We grabbed them.
Tyler, let me interrupt you real quick. Grab Kevin Stewart, quick, Brent. Grab that. We didn't have maps because we got rid of our intel, and then I'm gonna just highlight that because this talks exactly what Tyler's saying right now.
Yeah, and then so those guys withdraw. My reconnaissance, my 2-man reconnaissance team kicks back with them or takes them back, and then myself and my one of the other guys with me, we stayed behind to try to pull whatever stragglers we could off. We had a no later than time to cut it. It was like, I want to say 0-6, somewhere around in there, maybe a little bit later, but it was right about the time it was almost our cutoff time. We heard these guys trooping off, and they had completely bypassed us and were going down the hill into that train, the creek train feature. And so we immediately were like, well, either A, it's going to be some guys pursuing, or it's our guys. And we thought, well, it's probably our guys, so let's go down there. So we took a risk and marched down there. And as we kept moving, they go quiet, and then we kind of went quiet, and then they start moving, and we start moving, and they go quiet again. And then that's when I turned to my other guy and I go, God damn it, that's our guys. So, because I heard them kind of talking, and I was like, no. If they were pursuing, they would have like come up at us. So we start moving quicker, and we start turning, our green lights on because that was our signal for the night. And that freaked them out because they got guys moving towards them. And finally we're just like, hey, stop moving. It's us. And then they eventually realized it. So we met back up with them. But, this is so 2 things that I had for lessons learned. First is, as reconnaissance team, we really should have asked, what was Brent's withdrawal criteria, and at what point was he gonna withdraw? Was he gonna stay committed or not? And the second point is a route briefing.
All right, so that's I get it. These are some of the, like I said, imperfect decisions in imperfect settings, right? So we said, hey, we don't want to, I get that. Op4 said, we don't want to lose intel. We're not going to have them go out with SOIs and maps. Great thinking. But this is where we go, all right, but we need to make sure they know how to get back to the ORP, or otherwise, you know, our recon is literally chasing these poor bastards down and like waving lights at them going, please don't shoot, please. It's us.
Calculated risk.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
There's no times for rehearsal. There was really no time to do anything.
There wasn't. We did put a blue chem light up in a tree, just a real big, bright blue chem light of as you guys exfil come back through this way. So we had an ad hoc control measure that we put in place. But again, chaos of the battle, that's happening. Those guys are just trying to unass off the objective. And they just followed the path of least resistance down that hill. So,
yep. All right. So I mean, you're right. These are, like I said, this is, you know, make it up on the fly. But a raid is a valid form of offense. You're tasked with an offense. You're tasked with the offense specifically to develop the situation and tell higher what is down in shoebox, and that seems like a success. We fall back. And from that point on, Brent, this is now sun up. We're talking 8 or 9, or probably 8 o'clock in the morning on day 2. Battles, you know, this fight's been going on a while. And what was your task at that point?
So just to remind the audience, here we're at, you know, over an hour and a half, and we just got done talking about day 1, essentially. So, yeah, so the raid was relatively successful. The whole point of the raid was to gather intel, and it was gathered. One of our guys got a picture of enemy SOI, so we had that. And if you don't know, like, the radios are not encrypted, so if you can tune in, if you find the enemy's freak, you know, you can listen in. If they're not using, you know, encrypted words and whatnot, like, you can pretty much, you're getting the enemy intel off that. And that was one of the tasks that Light Fighter Studies Group was tasked with, was intercepting the enemy's radio freaks and listening in on that. And we gave them a copy of that intel. But next morning after our successful raid, I'm going to call it successful, even though we lost half of our guys, the mission of the raid was to get that intel. We got it. We were pretty much told by higher, like, hey, we like what you're doing. You're doing great. Keep it up. You know, continue to set in the defense, continue to man your positions. As well as, you know, life fighters continue to conduct reconnaissance in that area and keep it going. Am I leaving anything out, Les?
No, you pretty much nailed it, Brent.
Okay, so they were told, okay, you got us good intel. We know what's down there now. They're going to continue to develop their situation and push out screening patrols. Tyler, what was your plan at that point? This is Friday morning.
Yeah, so Friday morning, I'm going to have to try to think back a little bit to that point where we were at. I think we went into our first rest cycle. We had at that point been up, you know, for the whole day, all into the night. The sun had come up, and basically none of us had. Well, I had one fire team that was on a rest cycle already. So the rest of the section comes back, does a rest cycle, and then we're on standby till about, I want to say 11 o'clock to noon. I think that's when I do my next face-to-face with Brent and kind of work up a game plan for that rest of the day's reconnaissance. So
let's go over to Blue 4. Hey, sir, this is day 2, Friday morning. What were your orders? What were you supposed to do at that point?
Yes, sir. So I'm trying to recall now.
Yeah, everybody's getting good and tired at this point. But
yeah, so that morning, I think we had a switch of OCs, and it was eventful, if I remember right. We still had maybe some stragglers for the line. Maybe I'm getting that mixed up between the days.
I don't think Friday morning. No.
Friday morning, okay. All right, so essentially we get another frago. So, and it was to do a deliberate attack on the enemy line. Hire says, okay, this isn't just a fluke of enemy activity. We know that both sides understand that this is a gap between the minefields, and it's all infantry and artillery exploits. So we were given a narrow window at 21:45 for nighttime artillery. It was 10 shots, I believe, of 105 of whatever assortment we wanted. We had choices between air, ground, and smoke. So basically, we spent the next time just allowing the recon team to do more intelligence gathering for us, so we could finalize a deliberate plan for a deliberate attack.
Yeah, so that morning, SNS helped kind of complete some of the defensive posture on our side of the line, kind of advise some of the things that we learned during the sticks lanes. And then we kicked out a couple of recon patrols that morning based off of the intelligence that we gained, punching back through the lines. We wanted to get better eyes on that machine gun position and that open field. And we'll screen share right now. So kind of share what I'm talking about there. Let's see. Window. There we go. You guys see that there?
I see a bunch of pictures.
Let's see.
Photographs. Are you trying to pull the map up again, or are you?
Specific photographs and the map again.
Okay.
Here in a second.
Meanwhile, as he's doing this, we're still improving our line. So we're still setting out tango foot. We're able to get barrier fences up at this time. We did have some 22 caliber early warning trips. Unfortunately, we weren't able to deploy those as of yet. But now on the line, we're finally getting a rotation until.
But you're doing what a grunt unit should, and that's improving your line. You're dispatching the working with the reconnaissance, and you. So you focused on which part of the line? SNS the reconnaissance wound up focusing again on the far east, the middle, or the far west in the woods.
It was our westing limit that they had mined in up to the road.
Oh, no, I knew that, but I'm saying, what is SNS, like the reconnaissance section? Where are they focused on the enemy line?
Oh,
Can you see that now? The map?
Yep.
All right. So we decided to kick out
Zoom in.
separate patrols. We established a ORP here and kicked out a patrol of that finger of the woods there to the north, and then one straight across here. This is actually basically along this easting line is a grown-in fence line, and we kicked a patrol up there to get eyes on that machine gun nest. Was right about there. So we stayed there for about 2 hours. I think our no later than time was 10 a.m., I want to say. And we ended up getting some pretty decent intelligence out of it. Let's see if I can screen share again, bring up to it. So we got some great pictures close in of that machine gun position. We were able to see that it had overhead cover, that their guard shift looked like it changed out at about 9 a.m. And kind of lay out the rest of the battlefield for the first and third. Didn't make any contact, came back in. We saw the trails, what looks like the OPFOR had used, or potentially the first and third getting on that first movement to contact. But a good solid morning of just getting recon on their line from a distance without making any hard contact.
All right. Good deal. So that's what they were tasked with is, hey, we're gonna recognizing what's there now. And again, Missouri Militia was told, or rather, excuse me, the Blue 4, or said, okay, we recognize what's there now. Give us some good intel. Work on this during the daylight hours. And shortly after nightfall at 21:15, they had artillery standing by. And just tell us where you want that. Long story short, you can pull that out, but where they said was, okay, well, they determined where the middle of the line was, decided that's what they wanted to push. Because again, that's through an open field, but there's just no light. There's such low visibility. So they request that the artillery hits that center of a 300-meter line. And I'm going to go ahead and shove it up there, but I'll say, well, no. Before the artillery hits, go ahead. I'm sorry, Felix. Before the artillery hits, show me where you are. Let's use that map. Zoom in a bit, can you? Just like a couple of times. Good. Now, show us where you positioned your elements, because you had a feint attack and you had an assault position. Where were those?
Sure. Real quick though, I think it is worth mentioning the Blue 4 made a little critical mistake during our planning phase. We did have a fairly sizable skirmish from Op Force to scouting our lines. So in
I thought we
transition,
jumped the gun a little bit there, because I was going to say there was a pretty big skirmish that afternoon.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is our recon team disseminates the information to us, and we go into planning. As we're doing it in planning, I got to pull one of my strength squads off of the line, and they haven't had rest yet, but we didn't have an ample squad to really replace them. So I went ahead and pulled everybody off the line to do the op order instead of just the subordinate leaders to relay the information for the sake of rehearsals. As we did this, I'm going over to the recon bivouac, and I'm like, hey, we're about to do rehearsals. And I pulled everybody in, and he's like, you should have let me know ahead of time. Let me punch out some security. So just in time, they have a little scuffle with the recon. And so since everybody's up off the line, we just take the whole line and sweep our sector to try to pinch them out and deny any intelligence getting to the line. So we literally pick up everybody, suns out, guns out, and we're like, let's go get them.
Yeah, so I think a critical point with that was the leadership had already had a good brief and tabletop exercise. A rehearsal had been nice, but we had the key elements for the attack in place, what we needed for that night, at least with the key leadership. So after the first and third picked up to lottie-dottie, everybody pushing down the hill to push off. I'm guessing it was the LFSG guys reconning.
It sounded like there's two groups.
It sounded like there's two separate groups. We SNS kind of assumed the bunkers and let them go out and fight. And we said, hey, we're just going to pick up and move off on this plan, because this really doesn't change our timeline at all. Like, we have the plan in place. We're just going to move forward at that point. That's 15:30 Friday afternoon. When SNS was going to step off at 1600 and start kicking out recon patrols to sit on the objective and guide in the first and third for that night deliberate attack. So the screen patrols that we intercepted, at first kind of sent us through a panic. We're like, well, we need to follow through now and just assault through. And after first and third kicked up and pushed them off, we decided, hey, we're just going to move through with the plan that we decided on earlier, which was SNS kicks off at 1600 into an ORP and starts kicking out recon, maybe even harassment patrols to get focus off of where our positions are going to be later. And we ran into some comms problems with first and third, but we ended up getting our two recon teams in place and then coordinating with first and third and continuing on the attack as planned prior to that contact. So there was a minute of kind of panic, like, oh crap, like they just threw a huge wrench in our plans. But I think we're able to adapt through that and just say, hey, you know what, we don't need a huge rehearsal. Let's just kick forward with the plan that we have with the leadership in the know, and let's go.
Yeah, and they almost did. Even after sweeping that objective, there was a little IFF, a little PSYOP command and control, like, hey, Blue 4 RTB, like, if it's not Felix, don't listen to him. So we sweep up on the objective, and then we come to the realization that there's still guys behind us. So fortunately, what happens is that main group splits off. We sweep to the wood line to the north, and then we start coming back to try to pinch them out. Another skirmish kicks off. We think that we've got him at this point, but there's a third element that's split off. We have a main body and a secondary body, and we've merged together, but there's a third element that's gotten lost. And apparently they bumped into the last little bit of the recon team and managed to finish it. So everything ended up working out, fortunately.
All right. So what's going on? And you're right. And Tyler's right. I was kind of glossing over that. And I don't mean to, because there's great lessons in each one of those acts and those actions. what happens is down in Shoebox, if I understand it correctly, Op4 has got the reconnaissance elements, but anything as you move out of Shoebox northward, anything you hit, I think you hit a couple of the screening patrols. So Brent was also running screening patrols in that open area. And I know I sat there and listened to at least 3 different firefights that day, 3 discrete, some small, some big, but, or medium size anyway. But I'm going to bring this up because I have a question for you, and it's okay if my assumption is wrong, but Captain Felix, I mean, one of the things we noticed in that night fight was that your assault position was extraordinarily far back. Did that have more to do, first off, was it an accident? You didn't intend to be that far back? Was it because of the activity of those screening patrols and, spoiling attacks? Or was this just you saying, I don't want to be that close to an artillery barrage? Why so far back?
All right, so I assume you guys are picking this up on the screen share. Is that correct?
Yeah, we got it on the screen share.
Getting the map. Okay, so we've established a patrol base here. We've moved out in our lines. We haven't talked about the plan. But what Chris is talking about is essentially we've punched up to this wood line right here where the creek is, and we've lined our platoon up in this area, which is still 200 to 300 meters from the last known enemy line. Part of that, again, is me getting off there to the guys with noise, light, and litter discipline.
Okay.
So I want to get into position within rushing distance. But as you're saying, it's more so for the sound than it is the artillery. We understand the artillery is going to be mostly in the wood line for the shrap to catch. So it wasn't too big of the safety issue, but understanding as soon as you break this wood line, there's actually a little clearing between these guys. It's spotty between the trees. But as far as I could tell, that's within their beating zone still. So I didn't want to get into the beating zone, especially after what happened the day prior, until it was time to get games.
If I can add to some of the intelligence that we gathered during the day was that this wood line is actually kind of grown up a little bit forward of that. So he ordered that artillery line along that northern line there, basically where that machine gun nest was. And we figured that they had positions tied in all down that way. Later, we'd find out they also had positions down that way also. With that artillery strike, he took out some good positions later on. We'll get to that in a second.
Right. So, yeah.
That's another reason why he was kind of set back from that artillery strike, which he put along that line there.
Well, and the line actually kind of goes pretty much due east and west. It doesn't actually cut that far south. Now, it's a bit of a lazy W, and you'll see that right there. You'll see that like clear white spot that looks like a thumb. Yep, that's exactly it, thumb up. And so he had his line stretched from pretty much where that clearing, and it goes east and west from there. And so, yeah, down there in the creek bed or just on the opposite side of it, you do have an almost 200 meter in almost zero visibility. And so what happens is the artillery hits the center of their line with devastating effect. Honestly, I think in that area, I counted 6 positions, 12 warriors occupying 6 positions just in the center of their line. And artillery creates 8 casualties. Boom, just like that. You've got empty positions. You've got positions manned by just 1 warrior. It's a pretty, they were so vulnerable that artillery had exactly the effect that you wanted. But what was reported was that then there was this quiet lull, as you would expect, but it took too long for the first team to hit them. But the problem was that my OCs were telling me, yeah, but the guys in the rear couldn't keep up with those guys, especially getting up out of that, back out of that creek bed. And they wind up drifting to the east on the opposite side of the pond where there were manned fighting positions. And the slow part that drifted wound up really getting hit hard. And the irony is the fast team, even though they were a little bit delayed, they got into the line right at the center, took positions, and really started to put the hurt on the Op4 platoon. But I just think it was that delay from everything I've heard about this. I mean, I want to, before we turn it back over to you, Captain Felix, I'll talk to Brent and Les, and they can talk to me about what it was like to be on the receiving end of that.
Yeah, and if I can just rewind a little bit, before that, we had been anticipating an attack just before sundown. We kind of thought, we didn't know for sure, but we kind of thought that we had the advantage with night fighting capabilities. We thought we had more nods than they did. So we suspected and anticipated that their main effort was going to attack right before sundown. So that was kind of what we planned for. And I mean, right before, like 15 minutes, 20 minutes before the hours hit, like we were, 100% stand to, reserves were ready to react, and the attacks never came. And then at that point, Tyler and I had a powwow, and he told me, and this is what I want to get from you, Chris. He told me that they were going back to the rear for a little R&R with some hookers and stuff because they didn't expect the enemy was going to hit that night. They were going to come back at like 2 in the morning to get in place to try to intercept them. When the attack didn't come, they figured they were going to hit us first thing in the morning. So they went back to the rear and we're with the anticipation that they were going to come back first thing in the morning to be in place to hit them on their way to hitting us. So they left, and it was just my guys. And like I said, essentially how our defense was established, we had 2 squads up front that were at 50%, 2 per fighting position. And then I had 1 full squad in the rear as a reserve. And then that attack unfolded. I was up for over a day. I didn't even sleep the whole first night. And I think I finally closed my eyes. And it felt like 20 minutes after I shut my eyes, we're waking up to gunfire going off. So as soon as that attack came, it was gear on. I had no blouse on. I was boots and utes, Vietnam style. And, the whole reserve squad was immediately, because it was apparent that our attack was coming on that far east side. And just before the sun went down, I remember looking at that and I'm like, I think this is our critical vulnerability here. This far east side, I feel like this is where it's going to come. So we had plussed up that side by 1 additional fighting position right there on the edge. And I don't know what effect that had. I mean, it might have been taken out by Artie right away, but it's worth noting that we plussed that up. And I sent that reserve squad in that direction immediately. Unless you got anything to throw on to that?
Now, this is one of the times where I'm going to toot our horn, because as we had anticipated that attack coming at 1700, we'd come up with a pretty effective dispersal plan. We'd encountered for Cole's guys being behind us, so we'd placed a lot of rear security out, figuring they would pincer us, kind of like what Brent and I did 2 years before. So we had a plan in place, and when the artillery attack started, we were pretty well dispersed already. So you got 8 people. That was probably about the max that artillery strike was going to get. And we kind of already had reinforcements over on that side of the line, and we had a reinforcement plan for each side of the line, depending on which side got hit. And slow to implement, but the plan worked out pretty good. And as that attack went on, key things like the CP, when it was finally destroyed, you got 1 guy, me. So we minimized the impact of that. And I think all our prior planning went a long way towards containing the attack.
Yeah, I forgot about that. And I don't know if Blue 4 heard this, but we had a what we called a bump plan. And that was me blowing the whistle repeatedly multiple times. And it was for whatever side was not getting the brunt of the attack. There was 2 man per fighting position. They were to drop 1 man, and that 1 man was to run to the other side to reinforce it. So if you guys heard the multiple whistle blasts, that's what that was. And then every position had multiple pop-ups. So
right. I see Matt Getters is talking from the OC perspective when Tyler comes and says, look, we're a battalion level asset. Our request to battalion is to pull us off the line, get us some sleep, which is a completely legitimate thing. You have to rest your ISR assets. And so Matt and I are kind of like trying not to go, but wait, the attack is coming. We know an attack's coming. We know an artillery attack's coming. We're like, oh, this is going to be bad. But you
not bad for us. when
Right.
it starts coming in, all my guys get up out of their cots and go, "Oh, that really sucks for them."
That's right. They're back there with like chopsticks and bokum bop. Hey Jung's making them stir fry, and they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess something happens over there." I don't know what they're doing, but anyway, the point is, they're back there making themselves comfortable, and Matt and I are like, "Oh, holy hell, this is coming." But again, I think that position that I know which one you're talking about, Brent. I think that wound up being instrumental right there at the pond as the second part of the assault team went to that side of the pond. It was right in the perfect position just to really hold them back. And so that's essentially what happens. And I think S&S at that point went from, okay, we're a feign attack. You actually punched a couple of guys into their line, did you not? Cole.
Yeah, so I'm going to back it up just a little bit and share a screen here. We gleaned some intel off of that raid the OPFOR did earlier, and we heard one of their challenges are passed. Turns out it was a keyword for intelligence, titties, and we decided to use that to our advantage for the night delivered attack to try to get through their lines. But here's some of the intelligence that we got off of that morning recon patrol. We were able to get in within 200 meters to the next creek line and really get in close. Can you guys see that? And really see their overhead cover, and really tell the support by fire element, like, hey, here's exactly where you need to shoot to pin that support by or that machine gun nest down. And some things that I wish I'd done was, get in that position and shoot an azimuth to it from where we were going to put that support by fire position later. Some improves. But yeah, we were able to get just some great intelligence from it. But so yeah, the attack kicks off. We kind of had a breaking contact with the first and third moving through. So we end up, I'll screen share again and get back to our map. S&S, we end up kind of just right here in the center on the west side of that pond, which is I think somewhere right in here. And we're hearing the OPFOR like, hey, move up on mine now. They're getting ready to move on our right. And we thought they were talking about us. So like we get ready to move, but apparently the support by fire, they realized that whole section there had been taken out by artillery and they're getting ready to punch forward. So we throw smoke and there's a machine gun nest right there that I'm watching in front of me gets nailed and taken out. And right then that was our moment. We throw the smoke again and we just run through yelling titties and beer, titties and beer, titties and beer. Until we hit, back here, the mutt trails, and we hit a casualty collection point. We light them up because it's dark. We can't see that they're casualties. We thought they were just reconsolidating and getting ready to move back out. And then we start moving into the rear towards the west end because that was S&S's objective, was to hit the far western fence line and shoot the third flare from our plan to indicate that we'd hit that far western limit.
Yeah, so if I can go ahead and start from the kickoff on the assault. So we let the artillery hit, and I act as a guide for the platoon to run in. Some issues that came up was we were limited on our night vision and our thermal. So there was only 2 nods per squad and 2 thermals floating around. Myself and the RTO took point. So I'm starting to do the slow march up in the open, and I pop my smoke and try to keep my fire side towards me and hoping that the squad will follow in on the smoke. As I'm pushing in towards the pond, I'm realizing the artillery is still coming in. So I kind of slow our momentum, hoping that the squads will catch up. As we hit our gate near the end, we hit into some wire. So once we run into that wire, I go ahead and cut the wire, and I'm not able to get a whistle blast off, but I do get a parachute flare off. And I realize that the first squad is no longer behind me. It's just myself and the RTO. So we just go ahead and punch in behind in the fighting positions. As we punch in and start moving south again, we pick up on their running password. And so we end up hitting the western fence line and moving southward. And then we come across a bunker. of course, we get challenged along the way, and so you just talk to them. So I used deception tactics to say, "Hey, we're the Op 4 reserve," and they're like, "Well, why did you come this way?" And I was like, "Bunker safety kill." So anyway, we get into that breach. We respawn top of the hour. It's exactly 15 minutes into the assault. We get back in using a running password, make it through, and it's very obvious to me that because the first squad didn't follow in and break to the west, that all the contagious gunfire that was happening to the east, that's where the guys went. And so they finished their job in the east, and by the time they get to the west, we've lost way too much tempo and momentum. I think later on that night, myself along with 3 or 4 other shooters were on the hilltop near S&S's objective. I actually thought I heard their guys pushing in as a final effort on that west part of the line as a desperate effort, but it didn't sound like it was a complete effort. So from that point on, the shooters that we had, we're trying very careful with our IFF not to fratricide each other. We realized they were using IFF with their strobes on their IR and also their weapon-mounted lights and their lasers. So we had just enough tech to detect them, but not flag ourselves along with the IR. So we basically decided to try to keep them up as long as we could behind their lines, poke them whatever side of the line, not go to the well too many times, back off, hit them again in a little bit, back off, and that eventually just caught up to us because there's too few shooters.
Yeah, I see some of the comments there in the conversation, and some of the mixed units that ended up happening. S&S, we had a little 3-man node and ended up linking with the 1st and 3rd's RTO later because we had direct comms with him, but he was like combat isolated by himself. After like an hour, we ended up linking up with him. Yeah, this stuff freaks me out too. Like, getting this mixed together and all this craziness happening. They took us a long time once we got back behind the lines. Like, we knocked out that CP bunker, and then we moved off to the west again. But we didn't really engage much because we didn't want to shoot our own guys. So it wasn't really until we saw, basically a line of 4 or 5 guys shooting back into the south that we hit them from the west side. And I don't even know if they realized they were getting shot at from us. And they may have thought just the fire was coming from their south because it was just so chaotic. It was such a chaotic situation that we decided to bug out and link up with the 1st and 3rd RTO. One of the lessons learned from that especially was we had I feel like a good solid plan to get into the area defense and exploit it, but we didn't have a good plan for, well, what happens if 1st and 3rd CO goes down and it's just, S&S recon patrol left there, or vice versa. We didn't really have a good, how do we reconsolidate and coordinate, when we're discombobulated and combat isolated. I think if we were able to achieve that, then we would have had the staying power, because after the little hot wash we did with the 1st and 3rd, we realized we had probably 6 to 8 guys back behind the lines, all in different little nodes. Had we been able to coordinate, we might have been able to, form a concrete defensive line and hold that for longer for exploitation, but it just didn't materialize.
Knowing that we were isolated, we couldn't exercise the command and control because I would have
agreed. And so I think one of the things is I did hear some incidents of blue on blue. Funny thing is I heard blue on blue shooting on both sides, right? We heard fratricide shootings on both sides. I don't think anybody was landing their hits. I didn't hear any casualties reported to me, at least by the OCs, of fratricide, but there was, you're absolutely right. So the center of the line is crushed by the artillery. They try to flex to bring it back in, but they never did. And what we find in the, that fight lasts just a little over an hour, about an hour and 15 minutes. And then both the 1st, the 3rd, and S&S in separate units fall back off of it, which I think at that point was probably the most intelligent thing to do, because it was impossible to see who to shoot at and who not to shoot at, So anyway, they fall back. The line itself is then solidified. Then, the Op 4 is able to move forward and solidify the line. And so, okay, so you're now falling back. What happens from there, Captain Felix?
So as far as I can ascertain, the majority of the main body is already moving back as a safety precaution, basically RT being. So myself and my, I think it was 5 other shooters originally. I had 2 from the old guy squad that are just like, hey, we're here for a little bit and we're getting out. We were with support by fire. I think I had like McGoffin and somebody else. He's like, my back's bugging me. Like, you can do whatever you want, but I'm going. And so I ended up with just 3 other shooters along with myself. So essentially, it comes down to a questionable safety kill. I was trying to sneak up on the far eastern bunker to safety kill it, and somebody challenges me in the wood line. And so we exchange fire. I kind of break contact, and then they're like, safety kill. And I'm like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I count myself out, and my other 2 shooters are left behind. Unfortunately, their land nav is not strong. They're like, we don't know where you're at. So if you die, what do we do? And I was like, just try to keep them up. And so they did. What happens is I'm black on water, and I'm walking back to the fob to top off on water as a safety admin mode. And I think they survived up to 2 parachute flares. And then I think the OPFOR finally got them. So I think I'm the last one to beat Boots into the objective, because I end up using the road at 04 in the morning. And then we're in the next day. So I'll just kind of cut it up there.
Yeah. Okay. So you're in. No, that's good. So you're in the next day. You're reconsolidated on the your strong point defense. SNS, you are also reconsolidated on your strong point defense at that point.
Yeah. So we ended up with 4 guys, myself, 2 SNS guys, and the 1st and 3rd RTO. We basically say, hey, like, SNS has been going hard for freaking 3.5 days now. Like, we're going to do a Spartan last stand, try to keep them up, not let them get comfortable, just balls to the wall in there, give them one last good attack, and then move back, admin back to the line. So we move in, we do a good little firefight with the leftovers. It sounded like I think Ridenauer had kind of taken control of that group. Had a good little firefight. Did our 300 last stand, and then moved back to our lines at that point. Once we got back, we were trying to coordinate with security on the line, and we couldn't locate anyone there pulling watch or anything. So we set up a rotating watch on the furthest western limit of the line with an SNS group, and just kept rotating people through there. And we even had 2 guys of our own patrol filter in there. So, Felix had 3 guys behind the line. We had 4. And then we found out we had 2 other SNS guys behind the line. If we'd been able to coordinate, we would have been able to really keep that bulge and that line going. But we just,
but I think so that's my impression, is that you guys, the attack kicks off at 21:15, wraps up around 2300. And then for the next couple of hours, you guys are just trickling back to, your strong point defenses in shoebox, at least for 2 more hours, if not 3.
Longer, because I pulled watch from, I think, 02 to 03, and I was briefed on pass on that there was some engagements still going on. And then at 2:30 in the morning, I was still seeing engagements happen in front of me. So that's what I passed on to my guys. I don't think anything really happened after 3, but there's still people trickling back after that.
Right. All right. So that's the last of the Blue 4 attacks. And then we'll go on over to Brent. Brent, you've just survived this. You and, your platoon has survived, and you're given a frago. Want to talk us through that?
Yeah. So, upon remnants of the attack, and we were pretty high horse after surviving that, because it was a pretty significant attack, and we lost our whole recon element back in the rear. So we were just happy that all happened. And then our guys even had a war trophy. They recovered a enemy machine gun that was left on the battlefield, and we thought we were going to be able to utilize it, but the enemy had taken the bolt out of it and before they left. But they had left some sort of rear pain in our ass and behind our lines, which kept hitting us. It became apparent that they weren't trying to do any type of main effort or anything. It was just a sporadic little probing attack from behind. And we had been tasked with conducting an attack. I don't remember the no later than time. But I do remember we were going to have Artie available to us at I believe it was 0745.
7:45. Yep.
Yeah, 0745. We were going to have Artie and Smoke available to us. So, and I think this was given to us. This Frago was given to us before the nightfall even went down. So we had been planning on this, and the plan was that the life fighters were going to take us in, just like the raid. We were going to go to the Titty as our ORP, and then from there we had a attack position set up behind the suspected enemy location that we had confirmed on the raid. We were going to launch from there. But one thing that kept bothering me was that, these little probers behind us, I was definitely afraid that, once everybody picked up, main body picked up and left, that these guys were going to, do one of their little probing attacks and realize, oh, fuck, they're gone. And then, call back to their respective Blue 4 command and let them know, like, hey, they've unasked, they're out of here. They must be on the way for an attack. So that kept weighing on me to the point where I had to dedicate a whole fire team plus with night fighting capabilities to go behind and try to route these guys out. And then I don't know if it was Cap Felix or somebody else, but it was at one point that very last position on that far east side, based on what they told me about how it all unfolded and then they went through and everything, I was pretty confident that the very last remnants of the Blue 4 were out of our lines. So once that happened, I don't remember what time it was, I was pretty confident that we were going to be a go, and that we were going to achieve surprise. But with that being said, I still left behind a little RBE element that consolidated on our CP. And that was all our guys that, I knew couldn't make the movement, and guys that just, they didn't think they were up to the challenge making that movement. So we did leave an RBE behind just in case the enemy was still back there, that they would let them know that they would still run into one of our elements. You got anything to throw in, Les?
No, it was about the same. We were worried about those attacks behind us for sure, but we figured out pretty quickly that it wasn't anything significant, that they were just trying to keep us up. Matter of fact, I think the last one we kind of just lifted our heads and put back down when it was done. We got everybody briefed, gave a pretty good briefing on what everybody was expected to do when we hit our objective. We got everybody lined up, and to their credit, balls ass dark as it was that night, we got everybody out of the positions and up to our assembly point right at the edge of our lines and stepped off in good order at the time we wanted to step off. So
Yeah,
it's quite a testament to the guys in the squads, because a lot of them were pretty tired, maybe working on an hour or two of sleep at that point.
right. So you linked up. I know there was some planning. You linked up at what was it, 05, Tyler, with the rest of them to guide them in.
Yeah, I'm trying to rack my brain now. Originally, we were supposed to link up at 02, and then after the Frago, I think that pushed it to 05. So we came before first light because we had moved. Yeah, we had moved the rifle platoon back into their attack ORP before the sun had come up. So we had actually we made all of our hit times, and again, that's the second time in a row that that was a compressed timeline to achieve that attack, just like the night. But and again, at each of these points we took risks. When we were going to pull my reconnaissance section back, we did an enemy co-analysis and said, okay, we think, based off of all the things that they had been doing and where we were at and our op tempo versus their op tempo, we made a risk to, here's the timeline we're going to pull back from and all this stuff. And the same thing happened in the morning. We had actually gotten reconnaissance behind their behind their battle position at one point. And so we knew the proven route where we attacked from the night before. We knew they didn't have any LPOPs over there, but we also had attacked from that axis before. So, and on the flip side, we knew the backside of the objective, but we knew more about where we had attacked from, not just because of the attack, but because the days prior to reconnaissance, during all those skirmishes, we had developed an obstacle plan for them. So we had located their passage point, we had located some LPOPs, and we had a general understanding of where the main battle position was at. And so after doing a terrain analysis, and Brent rightfully identified the backside of that saddle allowed him to bring his assault element close enough to have a good assault position within 100 meters minimum of their forward obstacles, and still hit within the artillery reds those first forward positions. So I mean, he took a risk and brought his guy really, really up close. But because we had found a good route to tuck them down in behind the terrain, he was able to get in really, really close, hit his artillery as initiation for the attack, as trigger, and then start the attack from there. So when we finally linked up to them, at that point it became clear that they had been up all night. Our rifle platoon had been up all night. We took the risk of saying we don't think that they're going to be actively conducting counter reconnaissance or screen. We thought they'd circle the wagons and that'd give us a chance to do an approach march up, infiltrate the rifle platoon, and then go from there. So that's basically that morning's analysis that me and Brent and Les kind of worked through was how aggressive can we get and how close can we get before we can basically how close can we get before we conduct the assault. And then it was good because at that point we finally did start talking about our tactical control measures. What's going to be our trigger for the attack? That type of thing. And it didn't go 100% as planned, but it actually it ended up being in our favor because the passage point that we had reconned prior to those skirmishes the day prior, that ended up being where we made the penetration. So before I don't want to get in your lane, Brent, but it worked out well, I think. I mean, obviously, but
Do you want me to go into the actual attack, Chris?
Yeah. Okay. So take me up all the way up to the right before the artillery fires, and I'll tell you what happens there, and then you can have it back again.
Okay. So again, like Tyler said, they came and linked up with us at 05. Now, we didn't know if they were going to come with the original plan at 02 because that's what was briefed before they left. And then we got our Frago after they had left with this attack. So and then our OC told us that they were going to be here at 05. So we were kind of secretly hoping that they were going to stick to the original plan at 02, but they did show up at 05, just like the OC had briefed in the attack. But anyways, I got my little board here again. So the plan was we were going to come up. Light fighters were going to lead us to the ORP, and then the enemy was over here. And then originally our reconnaissance had some sort of what we identified as a log position because there was vehicles, there was crates. That's what the reconnaissance saw. So, and we thought it was over here along the road towards the back southeast corner. So the plan was light fighters led us to the ORP. We circle up, we get consolidated, we get accountability of gear and equipment, personnel, and then they were going to lead us to an attack position behind enemy lines. And it was going to be one squad, which was third squad, facing that log position, and then I was going to have two squads on line right there, kind of like an L. And from there, at 0745, I had asked for the artillery to be split. I was going to give, I think it was like 10 rounds. So I asked for 5 rounds in the front side of the enemy main position, and then 5 rounds on the log position. And I wanted there was also smoke. I wanted that to hit them on their front side where we had come up during the raid, because I wanted them to think that the enemy or that we were coming up from that same position from their front. So I don't know how that all played out. I'm sure it was good because once that artillery kicked off, we began moving online, and we ended up what seemed like at the time the west side of their lines because started seeing the minefields over here. And then as we were moving, I noticed on the right to my right wire and a position. I saw a guy with his hat off. And at that point, we just kind of reoriented and then breached the wire and conducted our attack, pushing through the enemy positions. What ended up happening is this log was actually
okay. Let me talk there real quick about the artillery. So here's what happens. So he drops 5 and I think it was 5 rounds of HE and airbursts and 5 rounds of smoke right on the top of the nipple, and that is, I mean, it was where you wanted it, but and it would have shredded. I mean, it shredded all sorts of material and damaged material, but But they had a good line. They had their bunkers. They were in. And the irony was that it looked like, I'm not sure, we'll let them talk to it. They had a squad up out of their position. I think it was the reserve that should have been right at ground zero. But the reserve had moved forward, or a squad had moved forward out of position, but it had moved so far down on the front, that is the northern side of that slope, that they were just as protected, even though they were only like 60 meters out, and you were about 80 meters out. So definitely in danger close of the impact of those 105s. But the vegetation was thick enough and they were low enough that of all of them, I think they took one casualty out of that forward element, the guy you saw without the hat. And other than that, when the artillery barrage started, their CP was way to the east. And I think several people had started making their way up the logging trail towards the barrage to see how they could help. And those two guys got hit. What I'm saying is, in spite of an impressive array of artillery, only 3 people were taken out, and that includes the string of 5 on the back to disrupt any supporting help, which, again, had the intended effect, but it didn't actually inflict that many casualties on the enemy. So at that point, the all rounds expended, and in comes Brent, as he said. He started moving. They're moving due south, and then they see right to their immediate right. Wait, there's lines right there. So they do this pivot thing and then go up the hill and hit the objective pretty soundly at that point.
Yeah, and if I could say, I was the very first casualty, and then the reason why is because I guess I was the one that saw where the enemy lines were, because I was the one that had to repivot everybody. And as soon as everybody starts repivoting, I kind of drew my K-bar like a Civil War saber and charged towards the barbed wire to cut it, because I was the closest to it at that point, and I was behind everybody. We had 2 squads online, and I had another 3rd squad behind that was supposed to be going towards the log. But I charged towards that wire, and I was the first one to get popped right in the dome. So I went down, and I guess Les took over at that point.
Yeah, well, our plan was we had 2 positions. 1st and 2nd squad was going to go from our AP north into the 1st position. 3rd squad with me and Trail was going to go due east into the 2nd position. I can't really speak to what happened up there at the 1st, but in the 3rd position, we hit it like a storm, and we had it within 60 seconds. Mm-hmm. Probably the only thing that really worked against us after we took the position was the Blue 4 respawn time was like 3 minutes later. So they were able to contest it. We held it, but it was one hell of a fight. But I made the call after we took the position. I moved down logging trail towards what would have been where the log position old guide squad actually was. And I came across 3 OCs standing across the trail, arms akimbo like this, shoulder to shoulder. And one of my troops asked, "Are we at the LOA?" And I looked, and beyond them, I could see the break in the trees where the road was. And the layout of what we'd hit and where the gunfire was exactly as we briefed. So I made the call. I was like, yeah, I think we've hit our objective. And we pulled back, set up our 360, and then I radioed the call in and sent up the signal of 4 whistle blasts that we secured our objective.
Okay, so really important here. What happens? Well, one thing, just aesthetically, it was wonderful because you've got an entire hilltop that, the OCs couldn't see from one end to another. I mean, there was a good 200 meters just absolutely smoked out. At the same time, while you guys are hitting that, and yes, it was taken in 60 seconds or less, while you're hitting that, light fighters, then your recon team is doing a great diversionary attack down in the low ground, also protected from the exact same artillery fire for the exact same reasons. So it couldn't have worked out better for everyone, but it just didn't have the casualty producing that you wanted, but it certainly had a good display, lots of smoke. And I swear, as you cut wire, as you cut the concertina, all hell broke loose. Thunder, lightning, this incredible deluge of a thunderstorm comes in, and all hell breaks loose. The assault has its intended effect. It really devastates the platoon that's up there. But again, you're attacking on their lines of logistics. And so within just minutes, they have an entire new platoon who comes in and assaults in. And so that's what I will say, hats off to you. You actually held the line. That's one of the things we always talk about, is how hard it is to hold an objective once you've taken that. And I'm not joking. I think we respawned 36 warriors that then smashed into you, 36-man platoon that was reinforcements, and they smashed into you, and you held the line again, and they didn't let it go. They came back with a vengeance. And so at this point, to my knowledge, most or all of that 36 is down. Your platoon is down to just, just 20 guys, and there's 10 of the light fighters left at that point, I believe. So you have 30 guys on the objective, but separated, not yet linked up. You fought off the enemy's counterattack, and I went to Brent and I said, all right, what are you going to tell Hire at this time? You're going to hold what you got because it seems like you can. And I thought that's what he was going to say is, yeah, I've taken it. It's mine. But he goes, no, wait. And he wants to find this other unit because he's like, we don't see any vehicles. Where are the vehicles? Where's the loggerhead? And so I don't know. And I'll stop talking. But somehow you two linked up on the battlefield. How did that happen?
So it's important to note that our attack started at 0745, and I was killed within the first few minutes, but our respawn was at 08. So that's how I got back in the fight so quick. But yeah, so when I respawned, it was right there at the breach in the wire. Light fighters had a fire team there that were holding security at the breach, and our guys were pushing forward. As soon as I was back in the fight, they started moving north to link up with their other two guys that were down south. I pushed forward, linked up with my guys that were on the objective, and then one of the first things I did was start setting in, preparing guys for counterattack. So we started setting in our 360 on the objective, and then we started realizing, because I had heard the whistle blast from, I guess, Les. Our signal plan was, hey, X amount of whistle blast for the primary objective, which was the main enemy position, and then another series of whistle blasts for taking the log place. So I had heard those whistle blasts, but it's like, there's no log location. Where is it? It wasn't there. It wasn't where we originally thought. So we knew that there was enemy vehicles out there. There was still a log position, and there was still sporadic gunfire going on. So what ultimately ended up happening is Tyler's guys started sweeping from the north, and then I had sent a fire team plus from the south, kind of skirting the road out in a wider direction. So essentially what you had is us consolidated on the objective, Tyler's guys pushing out one way, and then that fire team plus going the other way. And then, they ended up locating them, and then we coordinated with Tyler via radio, hey, all our coordinating efforts. And then what ended up happening is I consolidated everybody that was on the objective into one, squad plus size element. We got in a wedge, and we just started pushing towards that last enemy holdout, which was that log location.
And I got to be honest, they weren't in much of the of the FTX at all. They were supporting it constantly. They had a few guys that attached to different patrols. So they were, but I got to say, I was really impressed with especially being in that defilade that they were. They put up a hell of a fight. So, but you guys wind up sweeping across, your LOA, then you draw back to the high ground. And I remember I'm standing there with like 6 other OCs saying, how many are you counting? What are you seeing? At that point, we saw 6 light fighter guys, 6 of your reconnaissance were on their feet and moving up to do, a final reconsolidation, and 10 of the Op 4 platoon with Brent. And I checked with the others. And so that was when index was called, because I went to Captain Felix. I think I found Cole, and I said, are we at culmination? And they said, yeah. So I don't know what time it is. What is it, like 9:30 at that point, something like that. So that was a fight where everybody was involved. And I want to say the total number of casualties, I counted it up. Total number of casualties were something like 80 some odd. And there was, like I said, 16 people that walked down from the hill. So, just a real hell of a fight, but also some really good, in spite of the casualty numbers, some real good leadership, some real good on both sides. The counterattack and the repelling of the counterattack. That counterattack came together quick. And so, all right, that was my observations. and I've probably spoken too much as the moderator. So let's open it up. Hey, Captain Felix, Cole Salmons, Parker, let's get final thoughts there.
I guess we can kind of pick it up from the SNS point of view. So we kind of initiated movement on that. We had our westernmost position filled that morning. Again, as guys pulled guard that night, they're instructed once they were done with guard to sleep in your gear. That way they got a little bit of shut-eye without it. But we anticipated an assault early because we figured if we bloodied Brent's nose, he wasn't going to let that stand, and he was going to come after us pretty quick. So I was expecting something earlier and wanted to kick out some of our patrols before that, but we just couldn't get coordinated with first and third before then. But about the time that SNS is about ready to start kicking off on patrols and first and third is starting to man the line, we observe some kind of movement. I don't know if Op 4 kicked a deer up across our line or whatever it is, but it got us SNS to kick out a screen patrol down and front. And we'll go ahead and screen share again our position, and we were expecting an assault from the north, kind of up that draw that had happened before. And ironically, our first plan was actually to consult with Felix and hold SNS over here on the high ground in a reserve, but it just happened too fast for us to do that. So we, pursued whatever that ghost was down there we were chasing. And
we had
set the stage for you.
Cole, we had a 3-man team down there. That was another element of mine.
Okay, good. I'm glad we weren't just chasing ghosts. But let me set the stage that it felt like we were chasing ghosts. I call that the bone forest down in there now. That is the cedar trees with the super soft ground that makes almost no noise at all. And I'm telling you, boys, the sky's kind of orange in the morning. That thunderstorm's starting to roll in, and that is one of the most incredible freaking settings I've ever felt before. The culmination of an FTX. It felt like just Hollywood movie, just ridiculousness. Like we were expecting fire from anywhere. So we push in. We'll get back to our screen share. We push into. Pull it back up. Just bear with me just a second.
That was probably the longest roll of thunder I had heard that morning ever.
We push down from our position on this side of the saddle, and we end up actually probably 150, 200 meters down, protected from that artillery fire, pushing to the east, anticipating contact. And, man, about the time we get about here, that's when the attack starts off, and then SNS has to push back another 200, 300 meters west, and then another 100 meters north to push into the Op 4's lines. And, we really, for the first 10 minutes, we kind of got into a good fight, but it wasn't long before we were able to get flanked on our east side and rolled real quick by the Op 4. So we were able to draw fire for the first and third, but we weren't able to make a meaningful counterattack like we wanted if we were able to occupy that high ground. Just by LFSG sending that 3-man patrol, it guided us right away, intentionally or not. That's what happened. And I don't know if those were the guys shooting the flares, but
they were. Yeah,
and when you from a participant standpoint, hearing those flares fly over and the fire happened behind us, it was truly an epic feel. So if the people watching this video and commenting right now have never been to an FTX, my God, you need to get to one now, because just the freaking feel of that last firefight was incredible. I mean, granted, we started this FTX in a Huey and landed and took contact as soon as we got in the field. That last firefight felt like something out of freaking, I don't even know what movie to call it, like Armageddon Now or something. It was truly incredible. But
Matt Getter said Tears of the Sun.
Tears of the Sun. Yeah. Perfect. And one of the things that I noticed, once my left flank got rolled and they killed me and rolled into my guys, they said, hey, Blue 4 CCP up on the logging road. Well, I go to the center of our formation, and when I get up there, Op 4 is already up there occupying positions, and they're all proned out. They've commandeered our 5-gallon jerry cans of water for cover. And that's something that I really wanted to bring up was we identified in that first 6 lanes that the reason why most of us got killed so quickly was we were fighting from a knee or standing. And these guys were all proned out, fighting from their bellies. And that's what kept us alive on that night 6 lanes. And I have a sneaky suspicion that that's what led to some of their great success from defending from the counterattack that happened once the respawn transpired. So taking those lessons from the 6 lanes and then applying them to the FTX paid off dividends for the Op 4 in that engagement.
Yep.
We respawned again after that, and we counterattacked, but by then they were so dug in, it was almost impossible to get in there. So, that's the takeaway there is fight from your belly. I know, we got all these sexy Instagram videos of, tearing through buildings and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, fighting from your belly is what will keep you alive.
Yep. Being on the receiving end of the attack after the artillery came in, I was actually in the open, walking from the CP, checking on fighting positions, and I was making my way up to the QRF. So I proned in to call for incoming. And so by the time I made it back up to the logging road, I grabbed one shooter to roll with me. And there was a pretty good movement and violence of action for an assault on that westing line. So we got pushed out from the minefield. I lost my shooter in the process. I got pushed out of the reserve. And so basically reoccupied the QRF position. By the time I made it up there, they had already swept that line. So I held that bunker waiting for the reinforcements. And basically as they came in, I'm trying to holler, guys, fight from cover, get into fighting positions. And, everybody's taking a knee and they're trading punches and whatnot. So it's only a matter of time. But the theatrics was amazing. It was definitely calm before the storm. And when it hit hard, and everybody culminated at a pretty good point. So it was awesome.
Excellent point. And you're absolutely right. You said fight from your belly. This is a woodland environment. You fight from your belly. There are environments you fight standing. You do. Urban's a great one but yeah, that's going to get you shot in the woods, right? Excellent point. And you're right. The beginning of the week, to 7 days later, there's definitely a transition of people going, yeah, you got to get your ass down into the mud. And then a thunderstorm. Yeah, that was pretty cool. All right. So good stuff. Tyler, I'll throw it to you. What were your big takeaways?
So I think for us, and we the light fighter studies groups that we've already done RAAR. The big thing that and any depending on what billet you're filling at any given time, right? Your perspective's going to change, and so of course, as a section leader or if you're a patrol leader, a lot of it is your planning phase. A lot of it's coordinating instructions. A lot of it is setting conditions before you move on to the next thing. So those are the big ticket takeaways I think that we had. What looking back now, we owed Brent a lot more of a formal reconnaissance report when we came back. One of the things that we should have developed prior to leaving the FOB was CCIRs with the battalion level commander. We didn't have that. We were largely doing reconnaissance pull. And so it was, hey, go tell us what's important out there. But we still should have had some type of format to formally brief at least Brent.
Agreed to both, by the way. Agreed to both. That number one, you should have gotten more. Secondly, it was reconnaissance pull because we surely didn't know what was there. I mean, that was the whole story.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But even if we do get, reconnaissance pull is totally legitimate, right? We're developing the situation we don't know. And that's exactly what your battalion reconnaissance assets are doing is they're going out there in the close battle space or the distant battle space. And we were right on that line. I mean, that 5 kilometer marker is about the separation between close and distance. And so, but still, looking back now, next time, if we have to fill that role, we're really looking at, Hey, what are our priorities for, recon and defensive positions, obstacle plans, that type of stuff, sector sketches. We could have, if we would have taken the time, we could have developed better products, especially briefing products. And then the other thing is coordinating SOPs with the unit we're directly supporting. Whatever unit is in our area of influence at the time, that's on me and my guys to get better at. Okay, hey, if like I said earlier, you guys get attacked during the defense and we're back here doing our planning phase, how do we help? What do we do? Where do we go? That type of thing. Passage of lines. We got lazy on passage lines. We probably should have done a little bit more for passage of lines with the rifle platoon. And again, that's on our guys. The biggest thing that I noticed through the entire FTX, and I think this is, it's mostly with the rifle platoons, whether it's Blue 4 or Op 4. And this is for the leaders and those One Shepherd guys that are listening or on the chat right now. You have to set those conditions, set the set piece before you move the move piece. And I see this time and time again in training. And this is, this is why the warrior community has to not only practice individual weapons proficiencies, they have to practice these collective tasks. That's what we were doing. We were out there doing, moving to contact, area defense, deliberate attacks. Those are all collective tasks, and those are important. But at some point, you have to do collective live fire. And you have to string your individual weapons proficiencies together with those collective tasks. And what collective live fire does is it enables those tactical leaders to understand setting conditions before they rush to failure. So many times I've, whether it was in the infantry or here in training, it's not until you get in that collective live fire that you start seeing, oh, I really do need to suppress the enemy and achieve that effect before I initiate my assault. And if I don't, what am I going to do? Where are my decision points? Building your plan around a main effort. Here's my main effort. Everything else is tertiary. I'm massing at this location, setting this conditions, and here are the decision points. And if not, this is what I do in reverse. And just listening to all the leaders talk about, well, we attacked and then this happened and we started petering out. We have to set those conditions. So that would be my big takeaway for the key leaders is don't lose focus of the big fight. It's really easy for us to get sucked down and be a rifleman again. As a matter of fact, at the very last battle, me and Felix were duking it out. But that's when I realized I was making a mistake because me and him are shooting at each other. We're going, wait a minute. If I'm here shooting, then I'm not controlling my element. So there was times where I had to take a step back too and go, okay, actually I'm controlling and setting conditions. I'm cross-talking and coordinating with my rifle platoon leader over here. And we're the big picture fight, right? So that would be my one piece of advice for all those One Shepherd guys that are listening out there. Set those conditions, develop your main effort, and go from there.
Excellent point. By the way, I'm sure Pegasus Test wants to talk to you about that live fire thing, but we'll save that for another time. All right. Speaking of, I'm going to hand last comments over to Brent and Les, and then Brent. At 2 hours and 50 minutes, holy moly, we're going to let you wrap this up. And thank you.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. I'll kick it over to Les. There's a lot of stuff I could talk about. I wish, maybe would have gone a different way. Definitely would have expounded upon a better exfiltration from our raid. But I think we identified most of our deficiencies, but overall, I think we did a very good job. And I'm going to take my time to just, praise the individual warriors that were part of that Op 4. I never heard those guys bitch or complain. I heard some like, hey, we're getting kind of tired. Is there any way we can get some rest? And then my answer always was, hey, no, 100%. Trust me, in the end, it'll all pay off. And every single one of those guys absolutely performed. I had some great squad leaders. I had some great team leaders. The only thing I wish that we probably could have done is expound upon our, some of the defense elements. I had a whole bunch of range cards out there that were given to me by Tyler. And, my intent was to give those out so that those guys could make range cards and stuff at every position. That never happened. We didn't have, we wanted to have an actual enter and exit of friendly lines at one point of our defense that never was established. And like Tyler said, crossing and passing of friendly lines just kind of happened. It wasn't coordinated. But again, I just want to sound praise to the war fighters out there. Some of those guys are out there for their very first semester, and that was their first FTX, and what a bar that was set for them. So thanks again, guys. It was an honor being the patrol leader for the Op4 on this, and man, I'm still living off a high from that whole FTX experience. It was just amazing.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Brent said there, it was truly a pleasure to be the APL for the Op4 platoon. You guys were awesome. All the team leaders, squad leaders stepped up. They did their troop leading procedures. There was nobody there that was slacking that we had to account for. Anything that we asked of anybody, they stepped up and they did it. Another thing I want to call out is some OCs who did some great work on the night raid. Both Jay Webb and, forgive me, Captain Felix, I didn't get the guy's name. He was Corporal somebody who was an OC. Both of them had no nods in a patrol full of nods on a black-ass, can't see your hand in front of your face night. And they integrated into our movement. They did not cause any breaks in the lines. They did not cause any delays. They exhibited great night movement technique under conditions that really freaking hard to do even with nods. And that was a tribute to them because they did not cause any problems or interfere with anything that we did. And under those conditions, damn near impossible. Another thing I want to call out, Lieutenant Bolam, who on his counterattack took the violence of action and that aggressiveness would carry the day and damn near almost did. Me and him went down jousting together and stuff, but he took it to hand-to-hand combat and he did not give up that position without an effort, and Tua to him on that. The other thing is there was a lot of lessons learned here, but everybody adapted on the fly. And every time that we said we're just going to trust the training, we're going to trust everybody knows what to do, they did. We have minor things we've talked about during this AAR that we should fix about coordination, about doing this. But when we decided we had no time to plan, rehearse, and that we would give a plan, we would brief the plan and execute the plan, pretty much went off the way we planned as much as one thing could. And I think that's a testament not only to the individuals that were participating and their will to get it done, but also to the One Shepherd training for teaching the importance and that the lessons got through that the instructors taught earlier in the week.
I just want to take a moment and congratulate One Shepherd on the 40th anniversary semester and FTX. Huge, resounding success. It was a privilege to take part in. It was a privilege to do and have the opportunity to do the 5-day FTX. Thank you, Dr. Larson, for allowing that, and I can't wait to do it again.
All right, guys. That pretty much
was
wraps it up. If I could get you guys like Light Fighters and Missouri Militia and SNS just one last time, give your info out there so that guys can check out your programs, starting with Tyler.
Yeah, so Light Fighter Studies Group, we're on Facebook only right now. We put out educational information specifically on dismounted light infantry patrolling. So take a look on it. And then you guys can also apply for membership. We're a little bit of a close-knit community. However, we do take in new members. Just shoot us an email. And if you have any questions or things you guys want to discuss, just let us know.
Les, your Polaris company, touching that real quick.
Yeah. Polaris Training and Simulations. We're getting ready to put on the MGM Scout FTX. So for all of you that missed all this great goodness we've been talking about for nearly 3 hours, there's still a chance. Second weekend in November, sign up on a website. You can go to polaristsd.com, look under simulations, and you can find out what the exercise is about and how to sign up. Come out and join us. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, guys. So MissouriMilitia.com. You can take a look, see what we're all about there. It's real simple. It's two sides of RMO, disaster and defense. So we do train tactically, tyranny, terrorism, things of that nature. But the other side of the coin is tornado cleanups, sandbagging for the rivers, missing person, lost child searches. We're getting ready to do food drives for our local communities on here for the KC side or the 1st Battalion, 3rd Brigade. But yeah, if you're interested, just reach out. A civil affairs officer will get a hold of you, and you'll go through probation period, pass a background check, and get voted in. Find a area unit near you.
All right, so I'm seeing some chatter there on the tech side. Matt's been talking to the aviation guys. We were kind of talking to them before. We heard some chatter. The Cobra pilot was super jazzed about what we're doing. All those guys were, but he was talking about bringing the Cobra down for close air support. So, air assault, close air support. There might be some crazy stuff in the future for One Shepherd FTXs. In the future. So, the sky's the limit, literally. Me and Chris, when we started talking about this kind of thing, in conception, we're like, if we can't do it on the 40th, when can we do it? And this will probably be the only time we ever get to do it. So let's make it happen. And we did. Thank you all for the support and making it happen. But I think Pandora's box is open, and we can do some really crazy cool stuff now. That is it cool? Yes, but it also might be relevant to actual light fighter stuff. So with that, it's Cole with SNS Training Solutions. Next on our radar, we have Winter Forge, MLK weekend in January. We always cross-load with Light Fighter Studies Group and One Shepherd guys on bringing in the subject matter experts on how to survive and patrol in a cold weather FTX. And it's more difficult than you realize. It requires a gear set that is a little more in depth than normal. But, if you know what you're doing, it is possible and easy to do. So keep an eye on that. Go to sstrainingsolutions.com. Keep an eye out on Brent's channel. Brent, thanks for inviting us in and putting this AAR together. I think it was very needed. The hot wash was good, but getting into depth and really seeing all sides on this was very valuable. And I can't wait to do this again, guys.
Oh my gosh, it was an honor. It's always been an honor. I said there on the at Index, this is going to be a hard one to top. The fact that we've made inroads with the aviation unit, that they have not one, but they actually have 4 Cobra gunships. You heard that right, 4 Cobra gunships. I don't know how many Hueys they have, but anyway, it's more than one. And so they can pull these resources in. It's just a matter of, it's a matter of timing and coordination. But I do agree, Cole, that I think Pandora's box is open. I don't think we're stepping backwards. Light fighters certainly do include air assault operations, and it's clear that's in our future. So it was
Force is here to stay for the market. That's for sure.
There you go. It's been an honor working with all of these wonderful warrior communities. That cross-pollination has been a big secret to our success over the last 40 years, and I'm confident it will be over the next 40 years and on into the future. So thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to say one thing real quick, Chris. I think Chip would have been proud.
Ouch.
All right, guys. Well, that concludes our AAR, just short of 3 hours. Amazing. If you stayed on this whole time, my hat's off to you. So thanks for watching, everybody.